Good evening, everyone, or good afternoon. It's the Zoning Board of Appeals meeting on 12/5/2024 in the town of Chatham, pursuant to Governor Healy's March 29th, 2023, signing of the Acts of 2023, extending certain COVID measures adopted during the state of emergency, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. This meeting of the Chatham Zoning Board of Appeals is being conducted in person and via remote participation. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by calling 508-945-4410, conference ID 989-435-684-pound, or join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link in the posted agenda. This is a live broadcast and simulcast on Chatham TV, but despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide for real-time access. We post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. In accordance with town policy, the public can speak to any issue, hearing, or business item on the agenda during the meeting when recognized by the chair. We start the meeting with a roll call of all board members, and I think we'll do that right now. Actually, we'll do that in a moment. I want to just say that if everybody could please shut off any devices that make any sort of noise whatsoever, please do that. So we're going to start the meeting with a roll call of all board members in a moment. Then we ask if any citizens or non-board members participating via phone, just make it known what their name is when they're called on. A hearing notice is read by our staff, Sarah Clark on my right. You or your representative will present your appeal or application. Anyone in favor of the appeal will be able to speak for 5 minutes at the most, and if you already have a letter into us, then perhaps you can waive the reading of the letter. We'll get to that when the time comes. But there are a lot of letters tonight, and there are a lot of people. So if we could just either do the person or the letter, that would be extremely helpful. I will read or summarize the letters that we do attend to. Anyone against the application will be able to speak for up to 5 minutes as well. And the applicant will then have a chance to rebut any of that testimony. We'll hear any further information, close the public hearing, deliberate, and then we usually vote on the appeal or application. All votes will be taken by roll call, and at the end of the meeting, we will close via verbal confirmation and note the time of adjournment. And so, as I said, we'll do a roll call vote of all members, starting with David Veach, and we're just going to go right around.
David H. Veach and I approve this format.
Ed Acton, I approve.
David S. Nixon, I approve.
Paul C. Semple, I approve.
Stephen D.
Lee Hovey, I approve.
Stephen D. DeBoer, I approve.
Virginia Fenwick, I approve.
And Randy Potash, I approve as well. I think we have a list, one minutes to.
Yes, we have minutes from a meeting of November 7, 2024. I'll move to adopt those minutes as published.
Dave Veach seconds and votes yes.
I vote yes.
All votes yes.
Jeannie votes yes.
And as do I. So voting tonight will be David Veach, David Nixon, Paul Semple, Virginia Fenwick, and myself, except for the first application. We're going to have our Lee Hovey, our alternate, vote instead of Mr. Nixon. All right, so first application, whenever Sarah's ready, is 24-099. Damon and Lisa Harrell.
Application number 24-099, Damon and Lisa Harrell, care of James M. Norcross, Esquire, P.O. Box 707, Chatham, Mass. 02633. Owners of property located at 66 Thelma Drive, also shown in the town of Chatham's Assessor's Map 11G, Block 30, Lot G33. The applicant seeks to enlarge, extend, or change a conforming dwelling on a non-conforming lot via the demolition of the existing dwelling and garage and the construction of a new dwelling. The proposed dwelling will comply with all bulk and dimensional requirements of the bylaw, but is considered a substantial alteration, and under the second except clause of Section 6 of Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, such substantial alteration requires the grant of a special permit. The existing building coverage is 1,509 square feet, and the proposed building coverage is 2,581 square feet, where 2,900 square feet is the maximum allowed. The lot is non-conforming in that it contains 90.87 feet of frontage where 100 feet is required. The lot contains 24,100 square feet in the R20 zoning district. A special permit is required under Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 6, and Section 5B of the Protective Bylaw. This was continued from October 10th, 2024.
Attorney Norcross, welcome.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Jamie Norcross representing Lisa and Damon Harrell. Next to me is Tim Luff, the architect for the project. Mr. and Mrs. Harrell are in the, I guess you'd call it the second row on the left-hand side. Also here this afternoon, David Clark, the engineer for the project, Blaise Scioli, who is the builder, and Andrew Garrelay, who is the landscape architect. Just a little bit of overview, if I may, Madam Chair, and then Lisa Harrell would like to make a brief statement to the board, and then Tim's going to go through the design, if it may. The Harrells purchased this property about 18 months ago with the goal of building a home for their family that can be used for many years, and as they eventually enter into retirement, more and more time can be spent at the house. The lot is 24,000 square feet in an R20 zoning district and therefore is conforming relative to square footage. The Harrells' proposed house will be fully compliant with all dimensional aspects of the zoning bylaw. The lot, however, and this is why we're here today, has just shy of 91 feet of frontage on Athelma Drive, where 100 feet is required. But for this 9 feet, no zoning approval would actually be required for this project. But that being said, we are 9 feet short of the frontage, so a special permit is necessary for our proposal today. As Sarah mentioned in the introduction, our original hearing was scheduled back in October, at which time we asked for a continuance to modify the proposal. Based on comments from the board members and letters received from neighbors, there was obviously concern about the height and massing of the proposed structure. The Harrells and their design team have spent a lot of time reviewing the concerns and coming up with an alternative proposal that's in front of you today to reduce the height and massing of the structure. Just briefly going through some of the highlights, the setback from Athelma Drive will now be about 75 feet. This is measured to the garage section of the house, and the larger section of the house, which is runs parallel to Athelma Drive, will be set back over 90 feet from the street. This is in line with the current structures on the property and about 17 feet further back than the prior design. The setback to Athelma Pond will still be well over 100 feet, and the sideline setbacks remain conforming. The ridge elevation for the proposed house has been reduced by 5 feet from the prior design, which makes it only 5 feet higher than the existing house. This was accomplished through a combination of several factors. The prior design included raising the grade on the property, which resulted in the first floor elevation being about 5 feet higher than the existing house. The current proposal removes that grade change. The structure itself has been reduced in height by almost 1.5 feet. The ceilings in the structure, when you consider modern requirements, are quite modest in terms of height. It's 8.4 feet on the first floor, 8 feet on the second floor. As a result, while the structure is larger than the existing house, by keeping the current grade and moving it further away from the street, it's reducing any visual impact from the additional size. I think it's important to note that given the natural grade changes on the lot, the proposed house, as seen from the street, is essentially a 23.5-foot structure. This doesn't account for the fact that the grade of the street is higher than that of the structure, resulting in a situation where you're actually looking downward toward the area of the home. Additional concern raised with the size of the driveway parking area. That has been significantly reduced in size, which also reduces the hardscape on the site and allows for more of the existing trees to remain. This also reduces any visual impact caused by the additional size of the new structure. Obviously, as you'll read into the record and folks here today, based on the new letter submitted, neighbors are still not in support of this project. There are a couple elements within these letters I did want to address before moving along with the presentation. The gross floor area comparison and the neighborhood average that's referenced in the letters appears to be based on net area figures provided by the assessor's database, which does not include an unfinished basement or a garage. So I would suggest it's not an accurate comparison of floor area numbers for this project. Second, referenced in the letters is the impact on views and vistas from Athelma Drive. If you go out to the site, which I'm sure you have, currently there's no view of the pond over the existing house. While we're going up in height by 5 feet, is not taking away a view that currently exists from the street. There is a view corridor on the left and right side of the house as seen from the street. The width of the proposed house is such that it's going to allow for those view corridors to remain as they are today. So with that, Madam Chair, Mrs. Harrell would just like to make a brief statement, and then we'll go on to the design.
Sure.
Thank you very much.
Before I begin, I wanted to say thank you to you for seeing us again.
And if you could also state your name, just for the record.
Yes, I am Lisa Harrell, owner of 66 Athelma Drive with my husband, Damon Harrell. I also wanted to acknowledge the neighbors who are here today and also who came to the previous hearing. Damon and I reside in Bedford, Massachusetts. We've lived here for 11 years. Originally, we're both from the Midwest, where our families still live. I was born and raised in Chicago, and Damon in Madison, Wisconsin. We have a daughter, Lauren, who plays volleyball at Sacred Heart University in Connecticut. We also have an English lab named Scout. When I was in junior high, my parents, 3 sisters, and I began spending our summers at my parents' place on a small lake in Kingston, Wisconsin. Population 284. Spring Lake only had 8 homes, was adjacent to a cornfield, and was the perfect backdrop for summer adventures, not only for us, but also for our relatives and friends who occasionally visited. As adults, my sisters and I returned each summer with our own families and talked about how hopefully one day each of us would have our version of Spring Lake. After working with the Cape Realtor for 2 years, she called to tell me about 66 Athelma Drive. She was convinced she had finally found the perfect place for our family. Once I saw it, I couldn't agree with her more and smiled at the thought that my family was going to have our own Spring Lake. Our intention was not to tear down the house. We were perfectly content doing a renovation. Over the course of multiple months, we brought out a building inspector and 4 separate builders, asking advice on how we should proceed. The inspector pointed out multiple defects, the worst being the stair-step cracks in the foundation, their very nature indicating serious structural problems. This was problematic, especially since we wanted to maintain and utilize the walkout basement. The inspector and the builders advised that new construction was the best path forward. These were not words Damon and I wanted to hear. Over the course of many months, countless hours and multiple iterations by our team of professionals went into both the design of our house and the land in order to ensure we were within the setback height and footprint restrictions, as well as within the conservation easements. We were successful in working within all of these restrictions. Recently, when multiple neighbors wrote letters of opposition, we regrouped and discussed what changes could be made to address the concerns both the board and our neighbors had. Jamie Norcross has already discussed them, and Tim Luff is going to talk about them further. I also came back to the neighborhood to have a look at the houses that not only comprise Athelma Drive and its surrounding streets, but also the other houses that make up Emery Pond. I noticed the unique styles of all the houses. Not one house in the neighborhood or around the pond looks like the other. And as was pointed out, yes, there are 1950-style capes and ranches, but there are also houses that are contemporary and colonial in style. Larger houses due to renovations and additions, and other houses that appear larger from the pond due to the topography of their lots. This very situation is true for the existing house at Athelma and our proposed design. I spent years looking for a place for our family, not to list on Airbnb or VRBO.
Ma'am, if I could just say that this is like part of the, people that are in favor of an application, and that there's a 5-minute limit for that.
Okay.
So I'm going to ask you to conclude.
All right. I will conclude by saying our dream is not much different than anyone else's. We too want to create a home where family can gather and memories can be made for future generations. I thank you for your time and for your consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the allowing Mrs. Harold to speak. Tim, if you wanted to just run through the design,
Sure.
please.
Sure. I'll try not to be too repetitive, but I think it's helpful to take into consideration the neighbors' concerns. The neighbors' concerns were threefold: environmental, massing, and the aesthetic disruption. Addressing the environmental. Can we pull up our site plan again, just briefly? You'll notice in the site plan that there are 4 locations where new drywalls have been incorporated, which none of the houses in the neighborhood have. Trees were a concern of the neighbors that were coming down. 8 have been maintained, 4 will be felled, 12 were proposed before. So we reduced that dramatically. Driveway was another concern. Driveway safety was a concern. We had 2 curb cuts. The driveway has been reduced by 40%. There's 1 curb cut, a major condensation. Second, mashing. In the site plan, Mr. Norcross helped us to appreciate that this building has been pushed back. The front of the garage is 75 feet from the lot line, not from the street, which is another 5 to 10 feet away. When you push a building back that type of distance, almost 100 feet from the face of the building, the perspective of the house changes. It drops. Massing changes due to the fact that you've pushed the house back. We've also, the landscape architect came up with a brilliant design to push the house back, but also to drop it down. Significantly, this house has been pushed into the ground, and we are 5 feet below the ridge that we had before. It's only 5 feet taller than the ridge that currently exists. So that contributes to reducing the massing. The garage dormers have been changed. One dormer has been pushed in significantly, the other has been pushed in to match. And so the 2 dormers, if we could take a look at the model, the number 1 image on the models, maybe not that one, but the first one, image 1. That helps you to see that this dormer that you see above the garage was in the previous design much closer to the outside wall, as was the other one. And those have been pushed in to help reduce that mass. A view corridor was also a concern. The view corridor has been improved because the building has been reduced by 12 inches from left to right, 12 inches from front to back. The garage has been reduced by 2 feet, from 26 to 24. Aesthetic disruption was something that came up in the original letters from abutters. I'm pretty proud of this design. I've designed over 300 houses in the Old Kings Highway, and this house would be approved in the Old Kings Highway. We have true divided lights, we have shutters. It's a typical Cape design. It's a story and a half. It is not 2 stories or 3 stories. It's a story and a half. The current structure that exists there is a story and a half with a walkout. So we have not changed the vernacular, or we have not changed what was there before. It's a story and a half with a walkout below. And as Jamie mentioned, my client is 6'8" tall. He's sitting down, but when you see him stand up, you'll see. He's tall. He can't even fit underneath the standard door, which is 6'8". So 8'2" finished ceiling, we felt was a modest ceiling height for this house. We have not gone to anything taller, and the ceiling heights on the second floor are a little bit less than that. That is my general summary of the design, and I'm happy later to answer any questions you have.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. I'll briefly go through the criteria, Madam Chair.
Please.
And we can move along to comments. Number 1, adequacy of the size of the site. We believe the size of the site is adequate. As I mentioned, we meet all dimensional requirements of the zoning bylaw. We meet the height requirement, and we meet the building requirement of the bylaw. By maintaining more of the existing grade, has been referenced earlier, the applicant is able to better use the site to allow for the additional size of the structure while mitigating any potential impact from this additional size. While the structure is moving closer to Emery Pond with the revised proposal in front of you today, it will still be set back more than 100 feet from the edge of the wetland and will be heavily screened from view due to existing vegetation at the rear of the property. Number 2, compatibility of the size of the proposed structure with neighboring properties. Neighborhood is a mixture of homes of various sizes and styles, as Lisa mentioned some of which date back to the 1950s. A review of the homes in this neighborhood demonstrates that the homes are very unique to one another with all types of styles and designs. This will be one of the larger homes in the neighborhood, as shown on the gross floor area analysis, but we don't think it's out of scale. There are some small homes in this neighborhood. There are some larger homes. We submitted photographs of a couple, specifically 46 Barber Drive, essentially a two-story structure sitting up on a hill. So I don't think we're the first in this neighborhood to be of a larger size in that regard. And as you see on the rendering from the front, it's certainly not a McMansion. It certainly isn't going to overwhelm the street. If you look at that visual and think about it, 75 feet to the garage, 90 feet to the main house from the street, I don't think it's going to overwhelm the streetscape by any means. Number 3, extent to the proposed increase in the nonconforming nature of the structure or use. This is an easy one. There is no increase in the nonconforming nature of the structure or use. Our only nonconformity, as I mentioned, is we're 9 feet shy on frontage, and that is not changing. Suitability of the site, we believe the site is suitable without any negative impacts on neighboring properties or in the natural environment. As Tim mentioned, there's going to be significant controls put in place to control runoff, which are not there presently, so I think it would actually represent a net benefit to any runoff that's going to go down to the pond. We also will be removing the existing cesspool and connecting to town sewer. Number 5 often comes down to this criteria, of course, impact of scale, siting, and mass on neighborhood visual character. And we spent a lot of time thinking about this in terms of what's the neighborhood, what's the visual character, and it's really sort of two sides, if you think about it. You have this side, which is what faces on Thelma. And so this is part of the Thelma Drive, Barber Drive, Carolyn subdivision area. And again, we think this style and this size and this design, again, 75 feet back from the road, is appropriate for that neighborhood. The back, if you look at the rendering, obviously much bigger. But and we provided some aerial photographs that was taken by drone, were taken by drone by the Heralds. And you can see there are a number of structures around the pond that have this sort of 3-level feature with the walkout. Because of this topography, pretty much any design is going to utilize a walkout feature. Otherwise, you're going to put the house up closer to the street, which I don't think anyone's going to particularly enjoy from the neighborhood, because again, that's going to increase the massing. So you're going to utilize the walkout to create more space. So when you look around the pond, you see houses. They're all different designs, they're all different styles, but they utilize a walkout. They have that sort of 3-level feature to them. And again, this is from really a bird's eye view. If you're sitting down in the pond looking at this, is really from the only place it's visible. There's trees that are that shield our structure right here. You can see significant vegetation in the back. And at that distance and with that vegetation, it's certainly not going to overwhelm the streetscape as seen from the pond. 6, compatibility of the proposed structure with neighboring uses. Single-family residence in a residential neighborhood is compatible. Number 7, methods of sewage disposal. As I mentioned, it'll be connected to town sewer. It is connected to town water and will have adequate drainage. Number 8, impact on traffic flow and safety. No negative impact on traffic flow and safety. No issues with noise and litter. It's going to have necessary utilities, and 11 and 12 are not applicable. So just to sum up briefly, again, we think siting is one of the criteria looked at on number 5, and we think the major changes that have been made in the siting of the structure will result in something that is a big improvement and something that is not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. Thank you very much for your time.
And thank you. Is there anybody here or on Microsoft Teams that wishes to speak in favor of this application? If so, raise your hand, please. Seeing none in the audience, is there anybody raising their hand online? Seeing none. Okay, so first I'm going to read the letter from our health agent, and then we'll discuss the letters briefly to see who wants to waive the reading of their letter, because they're going to talk. So, our health agent writes to us on 10/8/2024. I have reviewed the plan to demolish the existing building and 5-bedroom dwelling at this property. The dwelling must be connected to sewer as part of the approval for the increase in sewage flow from 4 to 5 bedrooms. The connection application has been submitted. I have no concerns at this time. And again, that's from Judith Giorgio. So now we have a number of letters from people with the last name Page, Frito, Coleman, Nickerson, Silva, Mallows, Angeletti, Y and Clark. Those are the most recent letters. And then we have another batch from last time. Thank you, Sarah. Clifford, Muzio, Mallows, Coleman and Bosley. I think I said Frito, Silver, but just to make sure, Papura, again, Silver, Y, and Clark. Now, if I read your name and you want to talk instead of your letter, if you could just raise your hand. That's only two? So Silver? Okay, I'm going to read the rest of the letters then.
So this one was the form one,
Okay, okay.
so we still need to read the form letter.
All right, I'll get that out of there. All right, the first one is a form letter, so I'm only going to read it once, but I think it has a lot of names attached to it. Wait a minute, this is my page, so
Right, so this is the additional information, so we don't need to read that one. but
don't read
we'll
this
just
one.
reference it.
Okay, just bear with me. All right. Yep, Lindsay Clark and Brian Van Wy write to us. Dear Zoning Board of Appeals, this is on December 3rd, 2024. Our names are Brian Van Wy and Lindsay Clark. We own 63 Thelma Drive in Chatham. It's come to our attention that the proposal to replace the home at 66 Thelma with a much larger structure. We want to let the Zoning Board of Appeals know that we are not happy with the scale of this proposed project. The proposal is slated for this home will have 5,696 square feet of floor space. This is 2 to 3 times the size of the vast majority of the homes in the neighborhood. Furthermore, the home will be significantly taller than any other home in the neighborhood. There are multiple reasons that this project is detrimental to the neighborhood. 1, out of character with the neighborhood. Most homes in the neighborhood are 1 to 1.5 story structures with 2 to 4 modest-sized bedrooms and 1 to 2 bathrooms. This is a much larger home with exposed basement and 5 bathrooms. In addition, the current feel of the neighborhood is being near Emery Pond with glimpses of the pond available through the trees, even for those not living immediately adjacent to the pond. Indeed, when the neighborhood was originally developed, it seemed that a sense of connection to the pond was very intentional and important, as reflected in the fact that many of the properties in the community have deeded rights to access Emery Pond. The proposed building's enormous size would significantly change the viewscape of the neighbors living nearby and those simply enjoying a walk or bike around the block. It has a fundamentally negative impact on the character of the neighborhood. 2, harmful impacts on the environment. Good water quality is critical for the quality of life and economics in Chatham. Situated at the edge of Emery Pond, storm water runoff from this property has more potential to harm water quality and habitat than it would if it was located further away. Given this, a higher level of care should be exercised for construction projects in this area. Trees and other natural vegetation should be protected as the natural buffer rather than be removed. To minimize long-term impacts, every effort should be made to reduce the amount of impervious surface on the property, such as rooftops and pavement, rather than allowing it to increase. If there is an increase in impervious surface, runoff-reducing green infrastructure should be installed and maintained indefinitely to minimize these impacts. Given the scope of the proposed changes, it would be reasonable to require runoff from all the impervious surfaces on the property to be managed at a pre-development level, which is the US EPA has stated can be achieved by managing runoff from the 95th percentile storm for the area. In addition, during construction, it's important that most of the protected erosion control measures be used. That includes structural practices to reduce erosion and sedimentation from disturbed soil, as well as non-structural management practices to minimize disturbances. We should implement good housekeeping practices on site. We depend on the town of Chatham to enforce these standards during permitting, during construction, and after construction. In addition to water quality impacts, larger buildings typically consume more energy and water and have more environmental impacts to a greater degree than smaller buildings. As more houses are replaced with larger ones, it's not only a cumulative environmental impact, but an impact on Chatham's energy infrastructure and drinking water supplies, making the town more vulnerable. Negative impacts on the affordability of housing. As more and more small affordable houses give way to large and more expensive houses, Chatham becomes increasingly unaffordable for those who aren't affluent, those on fixed incomes, and the working class people who run the businesses, restaurants, schools, and other government structures, services in town. The town can't run without people to work in it, and that's becoming harder and harder. The proposed development is not responsible for this all on its own, but it has a large trend that must be slowed and reversed in Chatham to continue to function and preserve its working-class history. Thank you for taking our concerns into consideration. We care deeply for our home and our neighborhood and the environment, and we think the proposed project should be allowed to, we do not think it should be allowed to proceed. Instead, it should be more in line with surrounding neighborhoods. Then also from Lindsay Clark, my husband and I. Oh, same one, okay. Okay, next, we have a note from Albert Angeletti. Dear Sirs, we live at 118 Wilford Road in Chatham, Mass. Changes have been proposed to the property adjacent to us at 66 Thelma Drive. We feel these changes would constitute a significant detriment to the neighborhood. We wish to express our disapproval for the proposed changes and hope they will be rejected. Thank you, Albert Angeletti, MD, and Regina Angeletti, and that was on December 4th, 2024. Next, we have a note.
This is Dan's letter.
Okay, this is from Dan Silver, so we're going to waive that, sir, as indicated. Because we're going to allow you to speak. Yes, you've already indicated that, and we appreciate that. Next, we have a note from December 2, 2024. Subject, opposition to new home proposed at 66 Thelma. Okay, some of these have too many words, and I might skim through. We do have a limit. I can't start counting, all the words at this juncture, nor could I ever. But, so this person is writing to say, I just want to get the name. Is this okay? Mike
Yeah,
Page,
that's
Mike
Mike,
Page
but
said he's going to talk,
that's the
so,
form letter.
and that's the form letter, so it's already been read. Yes? No?
No.
No? All right.
So we do need to read it.
Now we're going to read the form letter. Where's that?
We'll just put his on top. So same letter as everyone else,
Going to read this? Okay.
and then the names.
All right, here we go. December 2nd. Dear members of the Zoning Board of Appeals, the topic is opposition to house at 66 Thelma Drive. I'm writing as concerned property owner in the neighborhood regarding the proposal for a new 3-level 5-bedroom home at 66 Thelma Drive. The proposal, which requires a variance due to the lot's non-conforming frontage of 91 feet where 100 is required, fails to meet 2 critical decision criteria considered by the board as proposed structures is more than twice the size of the largest home in the neighborhood and would adversely impact the streetscape and views on Emery Pond and the Cranberry Bog beyond it, and that we currently enjoy. The neighborhood is small, between Old Queen Anne Road and Wolford Drive, and includes the Thelma Drive, Carolyn, Barbara, Jeanette, in the R20 zone. Most of the lots in the neighborhood are non-conforming and would therefore require a variance if owners sought to expand or replace their existing homes. The application was originally scheduled for October 10th, 2024. The applicant has not contacted me or, to my knowledge, anyone else who expressed concerns. When the hearing got continued, the applicant has now submitted a revised proposal that moves the house closer to the pond, reconfigures the driveway, and makes minimal changes to the size of the house. Compatibility with the proposed structure in neighboring properties is an issue. They say that the proposed home at approximately 4,800 square feet of net livable area is more than 3 times the size of the existing house, which is 1,547. Also significantly larger than the homes in the neighborhood, which is a net area of 2,387 square feet. The neighborhood's mean home size is 1,536. The median is 1,514. Please see the spreadsheet. So if anyone is interested in a spreadsheet that's been provided by numerous people, it is online. Impact of scale, siting, and mass on neighborhood visual character, including views, vistas, and streetscapes. The proposed structure, despite minimal revisions, since October 10th, remains disproportionately large and poorly sited. The proposed structure has 3 levels with a finished walkout basement and a full story in a neighborhood where most homes are only 1 to 1.5 stories. The home that would be replaced is a 1-story home. The proposed footprint is 2441 square feet versus 1509 for the existing structure. The lot is at least 15 feet wider than the existing home. Its significant mass and scale will dominate the streetscape and block views and vistas to the pond and cranberry bog, which are integral to the neighborhood's visual charm and appeal. The slight reduction in floor space and repositioning of the home closer to the pond does not sufficiently mitigate its adverse impacts on the neighborhood views and vistas. In conclusion, the new project does not meet the zoning board's criteria for compatibility and visual impact. I urge the board to deny the variance request, as approving it would set a precedent that could erode the neighborhood's charm and cohesion. And so that was written by Mike Page, Kathy and Mike Frito from 10 Barbara Drive, Mike Page being at 9 Ethelma. And then Kathy and Mike Frito also say, if this is approved, please have no construction between Memorial Day and Labor Day. This is also submitted by Allison Coleman and Lisa Bosley of 6 Ethelma Drive, Deborah and Margaret Nickerson of 21 Carolyn, David Mallows, 88 Ethelma Drive, Daniel and Joanne Silver from 20 Barbara Drive. Okay.
For the next round.
Stay tuned for more. These are from last time, but we didn't read them last time because we didn't get there. I don't think we got there.
This one did not get read.
Okay, this one did not get read yet. John and Elisa Purpura from 54 Thelma Drive, Chatham. It's relatively short. They tell us on October 9th, 2024, that they're writing the letter to convey their thoughts relating to the application submitted. Upon our first reading, we thought the major issue was the non-conforming frontage number. However, when the stakes were placed on the property, we were startled by the sheer expanse of the house in relation to the property dimensions. We feel that the proposed plan for a nearly 6,000 square foot house does not blend with the rest of the working class neighborhood. It is more than twice, and in some cases 3 times the size of other Thelma Drive homes. A 30-foot high house will tower over the rest of the nearby homes, and this was from the last application. This is not 30 feet now. We do understand that the cost of the land and expense of the new construction requires that a house of certain square footage be built in order to make a project financially feasible, but we hope that the Zoning Board of Appeals will recommend a toned-down house plan. Many neighbors have resided on this road for many years, and we do welcome growth, but in a manner that complements the surroundings. We don't have to read this one?
Skip.
This one, I think we skipped?
Yep.
Yeah,
This one's a read.
it's just that?
Yeah.
Okay. Here's one from September 23rd, 2024, from Bob and Eileen Surgison from 180 Wilford Road. We have no objection to the application. Next, we
like that one, yeah.
yeah. Now we have one from Susan Clifford, 128 Wilford Road, Chatham. My name is Susan Clifford, and I've lived at 128 Wilford Road in Chatham for the past 27 years. The back of my property abuts 88 Thelma, which is an empty lot between my property and 66. I have carefully reviewed all the material and information presented to the board's consideration and feel that the compatibility of the size of the proposed structure with neighboring properties is grossly out of proportion. My home is a modest ranch with a walkout basement and an attached garage. The current structures on 66 Thelma, 1,509 square feet, and the proposed structure will be 2,581, a pretty substantial increase in size. Once the leaves are off the trees, that structure will feel like it's sitting just outside my bedroom window. I also believe there will be a negative impact on the natural environment, including slopes, vegetation, wetlands, groundwater, and water bodies. Emery Pond is just below 66 Thelma, and runoff from fertilizers, etc., will most definitely have an effect on the pond. I am not I am not naive enough to think that the current owners won't want to request permission to add an access to the pond, which will require removal of trees and vegetation. The size of the proposed structure will most definitely alter the visual character of the neighborhood, as well as having a negative impact on views, vistas from the pond. I believe that a scaled-down structure will be more appropriate in this neighborhood, and I'm asking the board to vote no on this request. We don't need to read this one. Okay, Sandra and Franco Musio tell us on October 7th, 2024, that they reside at 41 Jeanette Drive in Chatham, and they are writing to express their concern for the proposal to replace the existing home at 66 Thelma Drive with a larger home. This new home is slated to have 5696 square feet of living space. It is significantly larger than any of the existing homes in the neighborhood. The vast majority are in the 2,000 square foot range. We believe that a structure of this size is detrimental to the neighborhood. Aesthetic disruption, a home of this size would be out of character with the existing neighborhood. The majority are ranches with 1 to 1.5 stories and 2 to 4 bedrooms and 1 to 2 bathrooms. The proposed home will have 4 to 5 bedrooms and 5 bathrooms. This has been a neighborhood with modest, well-maintained homes. Property values will be impacted, which will increase our taxes. Many of us in the neighborhood are retired, and increased taxes could create a financial burden to some residents. We're not opposed to a new home being built. However, the scale of this home project is out of character with the neighborhood. Thank you. This is Mallows.
Dave Mallows, he was part of the other
Yep.
form letter.
Yeah,
They were part of the form letter. And that's it.
that's it. Okay, thank you for your patience, everyone. Now, is there anybody here or on Microsoft Teams that would like to speak against this application or has a specific question? We're going to go to the audience and then to Microsoft Teams, back and forth, starting with Daniel Silva. Please go ahead. You know the drill.
Good afternoon, folks. It's good to see you all. My name is Daniel Silva. I'm here with my wife, Joanne. We reside at 20 Barbara Drive. We are here in support of our neighbors and all the comments that you have read that have been read in the letters. I have a couple of concerns that have not been addressed, and I don't think there's anything you nor I or anybody can do about them, but I do want to voice my concerns anyways. Houses like this generally come with an abundance of lighting for some reason. And this particular lot, the house, will be on the pond, and I'm afraid that the back of it will be lit up, like Mar-a-Lago. But anyways, we too are concerned about the pond and don't want it to lose its character. Joanne and I have already seen this happen with a house across White Pond that was done by another developer in town. For some reason, every night they find a need to turn on all 18 lights across the pond, and it just changes the whole atmosphere of the pond. The other is that I think that the applicants have been blinded by the view, rightfully so, and have not taken into consideration other concerns that developers or a designer might take into account. Chantel, you haven't got have you got the plot plan of that showing where Barbara Drive is?
That would be Sarah.
Okay, see,
Dan, would you like the assessor's map pulled up?
it doesn't really show Barbara Drive coming around. But
Dan.
anyways, when you come up Barbara Drive, you come down the hill and it turns the corner onto a Thelma. The cars will be coming up Barbara Drive, going down Barbara Drive, and going around, taking a right up to Thelma Drive with the headlights on, and that is primarily the side that all the windows of the house are. So in the future, I can see what's going to happen, like so many other houses in the neighborhood, is a 6-foot plastic stockade fence will be going up to protect them against those lights, as well as the lights coming from the neighbor on the hill across the street. The house, sadly, is going to be a bit of a fishbowl, and I don't think anybody's taken that into consideration, so you really don't have a map of Barbara Drive, so I can't show that to you up there. I mean, that's right, but you haven't got the house on it, so anyways. That's all it was. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody on Microsoft Teams now that has a specific question or wishes to speak against? I know there's somebody else online, but, I mean, in the audience, but I'm going to go back and forth. Who's online that would like to speak against or has a specific question? Anyone? No? Okay, sir, in the audience, please go ahead. And when you get up there, just state your name, and you have 5 minutes at most.
Oh, I don't need 5 minutes.
Good.
My name's Mike Page. I live at 9 Thelma Drive, and that's the opposite end of the street from 66. I have a few points to make, but before I make them, I want to welcome Damon and Lisa to the neighborhood. This is a tight neighborhood. We care about it very much, and you've bought into a great place. With that said, I hope that we can come to a compromise that will prevent us from having the neighborhood feel that it's going in the wrong direction. In 2014, the house across the street from me, 6 Thelma Drive, was renovated. It became the largest house in the neighborhood at 3,888 square feet. No one said boo. No one had a problem with it. Great design, fits in well. In 2023, 14 Jeanette Drive was renovated. It is now the largest house in the neighborhood at 4,571 square feet. So, as we can see, we're having these increases. In 2024, 66 Thelma Drive is proposed. 66 is 17% larger than the largest house in the neighborhood, which is 14 Jeanette. 14 Jeanette is 15% larger than the previous largest house in the neighborhood. We have a home size arm race going on, and if you people do not stop it, you will ruin our neighborhood, because the next house will come along. And what's it going to compare itself to? Not my house. It's going to compare itself not to 14 Jeanette Drive or 6 Thelma Drive. It's going to compare itself to 66 Thelma Drive. And then people are going to say, oh, it's only 15% larger. The Heralds, in their defense of their proposal, state that this will be one of the biggest houses in the neighborhood. That's very true, but misleading. If the Empire State Building was located on Thelma Drive, it would be considered one of the largest houses in this neighborhood. And that is misleading. So there is a tremendous amount of pushback from the neighborhood. We don't like the trend, and we think that the Heralds should come up with a design that has similar square footage to the houses in the neighborhood. We have no problem with them. We have no problems with a new house in that location. What they've done is to create a situation where they've gone from a house that was 5,700 square feet to 43 square feet. This is lipstick on a pig. It's like a pair of pants that are slimming, but don't actually lose any of the weight. This was horrifying to many of us when we saw the first, and a slap in the face to us when we saw the second proposal. You got to save our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Is there anybody else here or on Microsoft Teams that wishes to speak against or has a specific question? Yes, sir, in the back.
Hi, Brian Phillips, 374 Orleans Road. The two things I want to go over, I don't like it when applicants get up here and say they had no intention of tearing down the house, that they were going to save it, because if there's anything really wrong with the house, I would have found that.
A question about this application?
No, I'm just speaking out against it.
Okay,
You know, so
so-
I just feel like, you know, the applicant was being dishonest, saying they had no intention of tearing down the house the first
We're
time.
just gonna entertain specific questions about the application or problems that pertain to the 12 criteria that we have,
All right,
okay?
I guess I'll skip my second point then.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else here on Microsoft Teams that wishes to speak against or has a specific question related to the things that we consider? Please raise your hand. Seems to be none. Okay, now, questions from the board. Oh, you're at rebuttal.
Just briefly, if I may.
Yeah, sure.
Again, we had touched on, in the beginning of our presentation, some of the concerns on the neighbors in the most recent letters. Just wanted to touch on a couple points. The Heralds appreciate the concerns. They understand the neighborhood, very close-knit. It's protective of its neighborhood, which is great. But I think a little bit of sort of not seeing the forest through the trees in terms of, we're looking at the size, but what's the impact in terms of the visual impact of the property and the proposed house? So as we pointed out, the front of the house, facing Athelma, again, 75 feet from the road, it's going to be a 25-foot house as seen from the road. It's not a very big structure from that side. And you've seen the rendering, what it looks like. It's not a McMansion, which apparently it's being painted out to be. The back has 3 levels. But again, that's consistent with other homes around the pond. If you flipped it and that faced Athelma, yeah, we're completely out of character of the neighborhood, but that's the pond side. And that's consistent with other homes on the pond. And I think if this property was in the interior of the subdivision, surrounded by other homes, what we're proposing would not be compatible with the neighborhood. But the pond side, I think, is going to lend itself to some larger properties because, again, you have that backside where you're not butting up against another home. There's more area there. You have the topography that's going to allow for the walkout, this type of design. So short of doing a ranch, which I don't think would be really appropriate for this property either, it's going to have that 3-level feature from the back. And so, again, the Heralds are not trying to create a McMansion. They think this is a design that Tim has worked very hard on, and we think it's appropriate for the property in terms of its look, in terms of its size. Thank you.
And thank you, counsel. Questions from the board? We'll start with Dave Beach. And this is going to just be questions, no comments.
Reading over some of the letters, I'm just curious because some of the writers indicated that they were disappointed that you or the Heralds had not reached out to them or to the neighborhood in terms of their input from after the first view at the first proposal. Is that true, or what's the, tell me about that.
So what happened was, after the hearing, everyone, the Heralds, the design team, spent a lot of time reviewing the letters. And we had several calls after that trying to determine next steps. And there was a common theme in the letters in terms of concerns about massing and height. And so the determination was made based on the Andrews review of the grade that we could reduce that by the siting. And candidly, there was 10 letters, and we said, well, if we reach out to 10 people saying, what can we do different, we might get 10 different answers. And then you're sort of chasing your tail in terms of what are the changes that you can make. So we thought, again, I don't want to minimize the work that went in, because there was really a lot of review of those letters and trying to understand the concerns. And so that, we thought, was addressing the concerns in those letters, which all seem to have sort of a common theme in terms of massing and height.
Okay, I just wanted
Yep.
to get your version of that.
Sure.
Which is fine.
Yep.
Okay, I don't think I really have any other questions at this point.
How about you, Ed? Questions?
No questions.
No? Dave Nixon?
Jamie, as you know, I wasn't here for the first part of this. Why 5 bedrooms? Why is that necessary? And I know it says it could be a bonus room and all that kind of stuff, but when I see things like that, I say, ooh, this is being made much bigger than I would imagine was necessary. I think that your client stated their family is 3 folks. Is that correct? I mean, just your immediate family. Okay, yeah, I mean, yeah. Anyway, so why a 5-bedroom house?
Well, I guess to answer your question, not necessary, but preferred just because Lisa and Damon envisioned this of having family come in and stay with them from out of town in the summertime.
Okay.
So that's the reason, David.
Okay, questions, Paul?
I have no other questions.
Okay, and Lee?
No questions.
And Steve?
Is this going to be considered a full-time residence for the family? Is this a part-time?
Right now it would be part-time.
Okay. The other question that I was gonna ask has already been asked, so that's it. Thank you.
And Ginny? Questions?
Yeah, Jamie, I think at the beginning, so you're right, the last hearing, primarily three things: height, mass, and fitting in the neighborhood. So I want to start with height. I think at the very beginning of the presentation was talked about the fact that it was reduced 5 feet. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. So maybe I'm not reading this right, but when I'm looking at A4, is it correct for me to look at the average grade 58.8 previous and average grade 55.4?
I think you
No.
need to, David Clark's site plan would give you the accurate height as
So I
opposed.
shouldn't be looking at that?
Well, I
'Cause
think the
that's only
site-
3 feet.
I'm sorry, no, if you look at David's site plan, and if, I'll draw your attention to start with at the bottom left, we have you see the proposed ridge elevation, the box 83.2. Jenny, if you see that?
Yes. I see
And the
that.
prior plan had, I believe, was 88.2 ridge elevation.
Okay,
So that's the 5-foot change.
okay. All right. That's all I had, thank you.
My question is about the recreation room. Is that like a gym up there? Or it looks like a gymnasium, and it looks like people could come in off the street and work out there or something. It's huge.
No, it's not meant for people off the street. It's kind of a flex space. A lot of times, the space above the garage becomes a flex space. Some people will use it for overflow company and July 4th. Other people will use it as an office, or college kids come in and flop there. So it's really a flex space.
Okay, all right. Somebody from, so we're done with the people from the audience, so we're finished, we've concluded with that portion. So I'm sorry, ma'am, I do see you there, and I don't want to ignore you. All right. Okay, Paul?
I'll move to close the hearing and move into deliberations.
Dave Veach seconds and votes yes.
Dave? Oh,
All vote yes?
Lee?
I vote yes.
Ginny?
Yes.
And as do I. Okay, deliberations. Ginny?
I'm sorry. There were a lot of changes that you made. Height, coverage, setbacks, changing the configuration of the driveway. I think that the before and after images that you have here really do show the effort that was made there. Something you said, Jamie, appropriate for the property. You know, in some ways, I don't disagree with that. You're right, when you're on the water, and if you look at some of the site plans that we have, the aggregate plans, you'll see those are larger lots typically. And so they can afford coverage-wise and setback-wise to have larger homes. But I look at your comparison that you gave us, and I'm really struggling still with the size, 5,300 square feet. The comment you made, appropriate for the property, I don't disagree with it, but I'm really concerned about appropriateness for the neighborhood.
I guess my only comment to that is, a lot of the structures you're taking into account are on the inside, right? Whereas on the pond side, larger lot, we do have one of the larger lots in this area.
You do.
And so I think that can withstand the additional size. And again, viewing it from Thelma Drive, I don't think it's gonna look like a big house, have you seen from the rendering? And yes, is it 3 stories, 3 levels from the back? Sure, but again, I don't think that's not inconsistent with other properties around the pond.
And just to be clear, I am extremely strict on the way our meetings go.
Oh,
I'm
sorry,
gonna even
yeah.
get more strict.
Okay.
But when our comments and our deliberations are made, unless the commenter really wants to involve someone else, the meeting is closed.
Sure, my
So
apologies.
It's not your fault.
Yep.
No, it just happens a lot.
Kind of directing some of my.
She was directing to you, and
So I-
and you appropriately responded. We're not asking you to stand there like a statue.
So I'll look this way, I'll
But,
turn this way.
but if we could do our deliberations among us, that would be extremely
Yeah,
helpful.
okay. So yes, I do see that, but I think in that neighborhood, the comment that was made by the neighbor at home property 9, and then Jamie, Jamie's sheet that he provided us with the gross floor area, it's by far way larger than anything that's existing today, even including the ones that are on the pond.
Okay, so more deliberations. David Veach, your thoughts?
Well, I was happy to see the responses that were made to the design. The lowering the floor, which had, the proposal to have it raised at about 5 feet above the existing first floor, dropping that down, reducing the prior proposal was proposed to be, the ridge was 10 feet higher than the existing, and they brought that down to 5.4 feet or so. The saving of some trees and the reduction of the hardscaping, some of the hardscaping was proposed initially, I think is a big improvement over what we saw initially. I'm struggling to a certain extent here. I feel that that what they're proposing is, in many ways, is appropriate for this situation. I mean, Jamie's presenting that, yeah, this is on the pond side of the neighborhood. I agree with that to a certain extent. And there is, I think it is true. Actually, I rented a house across the pond many, many years ago, and I noticed it in some of the aerials that you sent out. And there are a number of houses around the pond, and with that slope that present three stories, or 2.5 stories, if you will, to the pond side. And I don't think that's inappropriate necessarily, and I don't think that is something to be held against what they're proposing. It is the largest, it's proposed to be the largest house in the neighborhood. And so I think, I guess for me, the bottom line is I understand and I hear the concerns of the neighbors, and I think that this is a reflection of this being a real neighborhood. And but I think that all said and done, if this proposal were to go forward as we've seen it, project is finished, everything's done, I don't think it's going to stand out in a way that is inappropriate or substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. That said, I think a lot of people would be happier if they found a way to reduce it somewhat more, and I certainly wouldn't go against that. But I think that it's not, I am in agreement. I don't think it's good. It's not gonna appear, scale setting and mass-wise, it's not gonna appear to be looming over anything except perhaps the pond. And there isn't, actually, when you get over on the other side of the pond, unless you're on Agnes Lane or one of the houses on Queen Anne Road, you're not seeing much of the back of this house. I mean, I've tried to look, going down George Ryder Road, and I don't want to, need to keep my attention on the road. So you can't really see from the Cranberry Bog side, this, you don't get a vista of this. And I don't think the proposal is going to look inappropriate in that respect either. So I can support this. It's borderline, but I think that they've made some very, very good efforts. Thanks.
All right, thank you. David Nixon, you going to deliberate?
Sure. Yeah, I'm not a voter, but to me, this house is a beautiful house, but this is not the correct neighborhood for this house. It has been pointed out by a number of folks today. The massing of it, it's just too much. It's just too much. And there's so much, I think, extra in this house, whether it be the fifth bedroom or the rec room or whatnot, that it's a great list of wants, but not the needs in that neighborhood. And so therefore, I believe would be substantially more detrimental, and based on compatibility and massing, I would vote no.
All right, thank you. And Paul, your thoughts, deliberations?
Well, I agree that the changes that have been made from the first proposal are substantial, and that they certainly mitigate the issues that existed with respect to perhaps mass and the view from the neighborhood. Where I have a hang-up is on the question of compatibility of the size of the proposed structure with neighboring properties. If we look at the gross floor area comparison, which you have provided, we're looking at basically almost 30 properties in the surrounding neighborhood, all of which are substantially below the gross floor area of what's proposed here. What's proposed here is 5,300 square feet, approximately 5,343. The next highest in the neighborhood is at 4,571, and that's at 14 Jeanette Drive, and then it drops down again. So really, when you talk about it in comparison to size in the neighborhood, it's substantially larger, and as Mr. Nixon has pointed out, has a number of features in terms of the size of rooms or the additional rooms, whether it's exercise room or bonus room or however you want to put it. It seems to me that those could be downsized such that the building would then be consistent with the neighborhood. So I think from my viewpoint, it does not meet that criteria and would be substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood if adopted as proposed right now.
All right, thank you, Paul. Lee?
Okay, well, I echo a lot of my colleagues. First of all, it is a beautiful home, beautiful design, beautiful site, in a very, very unique neighborhood. It's a special neighborhood. It's modest, it's old Chatham. It's obviously a very special place. I appreciate all of the reductions. I think it really looks fantastic. But I too am still struggling with criteria number 2, the compatibility of the proposed structure with the neighboring properties. I think this is a neighborhood that needs to be preserved a little bit. And I think if the applicants could, and the architect could see a way to reduce a little bit, make it fit in just a little bit better, that would be my wish.
Okay. Ed, deliberations? I didn't mean to skip you. Just kind of skipping around.
I'm not voting tonight. so I'm going to just be brief. I feel the applicants made significant concessions. I feel it meets our criteria. I feel it would be, a very nice house, and I think it would look, compatible in the neighborhood. In addition, it's an R20 zoning, and the lot is actually larger, 24,000 square feet. And if this lot only had 9 more feet of frontage, you wouldn't be here tonight. You would have built the first design or something larger by right. So if I was voting, it would have my vote.
Okay, and Steve, sorry.
Well, I commend the owners and the architects and all in meeting the setbacks and reducing the size of the house from the original by 5 feet. But I'm a little confused by the fact that the owners originally made an effort to rehab the original house, and then that was going to be acceptable for their use. And they got 3 or 4 people in to take a look at the feasibility of doing that. And when that failed, or when that didn't seem reasonable, they decided to build something that's more than twice the size of what the existing house is. So I don't know how the existing house could have been okay, but then they suddenly needed something that's more than twice the size of what they were going to look at. And then the other thing that sort of bothers me is that, when we get these applications, you always get 1 or 2 pros and cons. There's some letters that we get that are favorable and some that are not, and sometimes we don't get any. But the fact that we got probably 10 or a dozen, that sort of weighs on my decision, that I think that this would probably be detrimental to the neighborhood. And it could be scaled down to almost to what they were going to try to live with originally.
I see. And I'm just going to point out one thing that I noticed. There is an empty lot next to it, and people can say no one's ever going to build there. But imagine if they did, it would look awful crowded, with this big house, and then even a small one next to it. So that's somewhat concerning. But I actually agree with everything that Mr. Nixon said, and pretty much what Paul said and what Ginny has said. So do you want us to vote? What would you like us to do?
If I could just have a moment to speak to my clients?
Sure.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, so we're going to go to the next application as opposed to waiting, and we'll get back to that one afterwards. And so, I already lost my sheet. No, next application is only the second one, which is 144 Chat Harbor Lane, number 24-126, with attorney Michael Ford, whenever Sarah's ready.
Application number 24-126, RNS Nominee Trust, care of Michael D. Ford Esquire, P.O. Box 485, West Harwich, Mass. 02671. Owner of property located at 144 Chat Harbor Lane, also shown on the Town of Chatham's Assessor's Map 5B, Block 1, Lot 10. The applicant seeks to modify special permit number 22-082, granted on October 13th, 2024, which allowed for the demolition of the existing dwelling and the construction of a new dwelling. The applicant now seeks to modify this special permit to allow for a new design. The approved dwelling was proposed to be located 12 feet from the Coastal Conservancy District. The proposed dwelling will be located 14 feet from the Coastal Conservancy District, where a 50-foot setback is required. The approved building coverage was 1,650 square feet, 11.5%, and the proposed building coverage is 1,625 square feet, 11.3%, where 15% is the maximum allowed. The lot is non-conforming in that it contains 14,400 square feet of buildable upland, or 20,000 square feet is required in the R20 zoning district. A special permit is required under Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Sections 6 and 14, and Sections 5B and 8D to be a protective bylaw.
Attorney Ford, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the board. Attorney Michael Ford, representing the applicant, RNS Nominee Trust. With me, I believe online, are Sean Riley, the site engineer from Ty and Bond, and also representatives of Catalano Associates, the architects who have put together the plan that's before you tonight on the modification. So in October of 2022, after a long and arduous permitting, this board granted a special permit to allow a single-family home on this 178,000 square foot lot. Most of the lot is developmentally challenged, either wetlands or in floodplain, or there's an existing house on the site, and we worked very hard with the neighborhood to come up with a plan that everyone could support. And while perhaps not everybody got everything they wanted, the vast majority of folks did not object to the plan that this board approved. Since that time, my clients have retained a new architect and have moved on to a new architect and a new builder. And as a result of that, the plan that was approved by the board, designed by the prior architect, the one of record, is not one that they can proceed with at this point. And so they hired Catalano Associates, and the goal was to design a house that was, in all respects, in terms of mass, height, coverage, the same as the house that was previously approved. It went through many iterations among the team, and we were hopeful that it could be designed in such a fashion that perhaps, given the fact that it did not trigger any new metrics, that indeed it was going to be 112 square feet smaller in terms of coverage. It was going to be smaller in terms of the gross floor area, and was also going to be exactly the same height and sit on the same footprint, except getting a little bit better in terms of the setback from the Coastal Conservancy District, that it might not need another review by the board. But the decision was made, and I respect it, that because the last special permit was tied to a specific plan, that this should come back here for your review and approval. And so that's what we've done. And so we've applied for a modification, and the modification really is to swap out the old plan for the new plan. And what we'd like to do is compare the existing approved plan with the proposed plan so that the board can understand where the changes are in terms of the design. Again, as I've indicated, it's a reduction of 112 square feet in gross floor area, same height, little smaller in terms of lot coverage, and a setback of 14 feet from the Coastal Conservancy District, where the other one was 12. And so to do that, the plans are up on the screen. The approved plan is on the bottom, and the proposed plan is on the top. And what we tried to, the new architect tried to do was to be true to the actual design and layout in every respect they could while designing a new house, to keep it in keeping with the general look and feel of the prior one. This is facing the water. The last one was facing the woods. And these are the two ends. The approved ones are on the right-hand side, and the proposed ones are on the left-hand side. So that's the change in the configuration. You can see the change in the foundation itself. Again, we got a little smaller in terms of the foundation, in terms of lot coverage overall. The layout of the house inside is a little bit different in terms of the way it was the last time. Not that you necessarily voted on that, but we wanted you to see that. And that's the second floor. And there's the site plan. And this is an interesting lot, as some of you board members were on it and worked with us on it for quite some period of time. There were several iterations of houses before this one that came before the board that did not proceed. And the prior ones were to be located to the north, farther away from the water, but it was a neighbor's strong desire to have the house be down where the existing house was. The existing house on that site plan, if you can see it, is south of the green line, which is the floodplain line. And this house is actually not in the floodplain. We found a spot that was not in the floodplain, and we're able to get everything in it. And so for all of the development limitations that were on this lot, we worked so hard on last time and got your approval and Conservation's approval, it's in a good spot.
If you want, Attorney Ford, we do have your findings, and
Yes.
we're happy to let you conclude at any point in time you'd like to.
Okay. I like what I'm hearing. So let me just get to the findings.
We have them.
You have them?
Yes, so they're on the
Okay.
record.
So they're on the record, and I will rely on the findings that are on record. And I think we meet all of the findings. We met them last time. I think we meet them this time because we do a little bit better in terms of the metrics than last time. And I don't think there's any other changes in terms of view, vistas, or any other impacts on the neighborhood. You will read a letter from the Conservation Commission. Sean Riley has been working with them as we've been going through iterations, and they feel this plan is simply a field change.
Yeah.
And they've sent that letter to you.
No,
So-
thank you so much, and I know your staff is here, and if anybody has any questions, we'll definitely take advantage of that.
Great. Thank
So,
you.
Thank you very much. At this point, does anybody here on Microsoft Teams would like to speak in favor of this application? If so, okay, sir, step right up to the mic. If there's anybody online, just let me know so I can get to you next. Don't see anybody, but we're going to wait till this gentleman. And this is in favor, just so you know, sir, this is if you have something in favor.
I understand.
Okay.
Lou Hyde, Chat Harbor Lane. Hi. We were the group that was involved with the prior projects back in 2018, a very contentious time. And in fact, we're still indebted to one of the members, I forget who it was, who at the last minute figured out that the number of trees they were planning to take down, which they kept saying was 25, turned out to be 130 or something. So anyway, that didn't happen. So in 2022, Mr. Ford contacted our lawyer that we had for the previous project in order to see if we could get together and agree, as he said. So I anticipate that this will stay in favor, but we do have, and several of the other neighbors have some clarifications we wanted to quickly go over so that you could answer, so that we don't, it was a little odd and strange.
So this sounds like it's the form of questions. Would that be accurate? Do you have some questions for us?
Yeah,
Okay, then
clarifications.
I'm going to ask you to sit down, and when we get to that part of the hearing, you can ask your questions.
Okay.
Thank you, because we have to stick to the plan. And we're doing in favor now. Does anybody else wish to speak in favor of this application? If so, please raise your hand. Seeing none, I'm going to read the letters from Conservation Commission and our Health Department. First, the Health Department tells us on Wednesday, November 27th, 2024, I have no concerns about the proposed changes to this special permit. And that's Judith Giorgio. Then we have a note from the Conservation Commission, and they tell us on November 7th, 2024, the applicant was issued an order of conditions on November 15th, 2022, this is, they're going to revise whatever they need to in order to go ahead and provide for this one to go forward as well. Then we have a note from Nathaniel B. and Joy A. Wardle, and they tell us on November 26, 2024, my wife Joy and I write in opposition to the proposed changes of the application. It's not in compliance with any of the areas of concern, setback, square footage, and is a non-conforming lot, etc. The parties were well aware of the property's limitations upon purchase, and we feel they should be held to original specifications of the special permit of record. And we all agree that the area is extremely fragile and road access in and out is very limited. Chat Harbor Lane is one lane of traffic from Cockle Cove entrance into Chat Harbor Lane. It continues this way until you reach the end of the road at number 144. We as neighbors are very concerned about the welfare of Chat Harbor Lane, and with the issue of very large vehicles on an already fragile roadway, and a new design suggests a larger and higher dwelling, then that's with a question mark. We also share a concern about any work being done between the months of May and September, as 20-plus dwellings, rentals, summer visitors, and year-round residents are affected. The road sees far more traffic than most would realize due to the interest in the beach and water access to Eel River. There's also a concern about access through the property to the existing seawall, as upon construction, a stairway was required upon construction, allowing for foot traffic to be allowed from the end of Chat Harbor Lane onto the beach. As the original owners of this property, we sincerely hope all care is taken in making the appropriate decisions regarding this unique property. And again, this is Nathaniel and Joy Wardle, 358 Cockle Cove Road. That concludes those. Oh, wait a minute, I didn't see that. Then we have one more, I'm sorry, from John and Mary Curtin from 18 Chat Harbor Lane. They tell us on December 4th, 2024, that they're very concerned with the proposed construction of a new dwelling at 144 Chat Harbor Lane. The land is fragile. It's gone through extensive discussions and amendments historically. The environment, road, marsh, seawall, shoreline, roads, trees, along with a house that is not within the existing footprint on a non-conforming lot creates a concern for today and, more importantly, tomorrow. within a Chatham Lane community that has numerous generations of families, which has built a strong neighborhood bond. Allowing this construction not only doesn't fit with the ethos, it also goes against the responsibility of the ZBA and Chatham ethics. We are not opposed to rebuilding a new home on the already disturbed area on the old dune to the north of the seawall. We would like the construction to be limited to the buildable land on the dune. In our view, building any structure on the wooded knoll would risk both an environmental and community issue. Thank you for considering our concerns to this project. That's that. Now I'm going to ask if there's anybody that has any questions or wishes to speak against this application, either here or Microsoft Teams, please indicate. And we just have that same gentleman. Now you're going to come, go ahead, sir. And you can ask your questions when you get to the mic, and just state your name one more time if you would.
Lou Hyde, Chatham Lane, and as I mentioned, we had worked with Mr. Ford through our lawyer and basically decided to approve or give our approval the last time. But we did have several of our neighbors have some questions I'd like you to clarify or reassure us. So this is presented as strictly an architectural change, and we just want to make sure that there wasn't, because we don't, this is complicated. I mean, you folks deal with this all the time. The lawyers and the construction guys, this is their livelihood. We get something in a week, oh, gee, how do we figure this out? It's very complex. So we just want to make sure, be reassured that nothing else is in the fine print or something. In other words, anything other than this, is everything else exactly as it was before, all the conditions, et cetera? Is there anything, they take down more trees, more driveway space, anything else, or is it just the architectural?
We're going to let Mr. Ford answer that on the record.
It is limited to that, Mr. Hyde, just the architectural. We've tried to keep the site plan exactly as is, other than make it a little bit better, getting it a couple of feet farther away from the coastal bank. But that's all the same. The parking area's in the same place, septic's in the same place. We're not cutting down any of that stand of trees that heads back towards all of your properties. That's not proposed.
Great.
The conservation plan is staying the same, except for a field change for this particular plan to pick up a couple of those small things around the foundation itself that are shown on the site plan. With respect to the conditions, we're not seeking any change in those conditions. And as you may recall, and to Mr. Wardell's letter that you read, the board imposed a 4-month no-build restriction here because of that tight lane. So we already have a restriction, no construction between June 1st and October 1st of any kind to be allowed. We're not seeking any change in that.
Good.
So, nor are we seeking changes in the fact that any structure accessory, that was a big thing that your group wanted to make sure.
Yes.
We weren't going to build a barn or something else. Anytime we want to seek an accessory structure, if we do, got to come to this board.
Yes.
You get notice.
Thank you. Great.
All right? Then there was one more there that we're not seeking to change either. That prior to the issuance of a certificate of use and occupancy for the building, the culvert in the road, which we're charged with repairing and then protecting during the construction period, shall be inspected and restored to its current condition prior to the start of construction. So the culvert is something forefront in our minds. First thing we're going to get at in the beginning of construction to replace it and make sure it's okay. And that's tied into the certificate of use and occupancy as well, because that might not necessarily be, so we agreed to it as part of that.
To clarify, so is there going to be work on the culvert before the project starts?
There will be.
Through the chair.
Maybe I'll let Sean Riley answer that. Sean?
Okay.
Through the chair.
Okay, and then
Yes,
we're almost at 5 minutes, we've passed 5 minutes, so this is it for
Doesn't
this
the amount of
gentleman.
time he talked count for that
Yeah.
5 minutes?
No, I know that, but
Come
we have rules, and we're gonna
I
let,
get paid by the word.
we're gonna let the
You do.
professional answer that question, because I have now acknowledged him, and then we're going to stop this.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sean Riley, Ty and Bond, for the record, representing the applicant. I believe that the condition was to review the condition of the culvert. We are going to plate the roadway over the culvert for the heavy traffic. We are to monitor that culvert's condition throughout construction and then provide a report at the completion of construction to ensure that there's no degradation to that culvert. So that was the condition that was imposed.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and
Can I
thank
ask
you, sir.
Can I ask one, less than a minute? One more question, please.
Go ahead.
So tell me if I'm wrong, but I think the house is going to be moved a little bit, so it says it's going to be the same height. But if the height meaning from the ground to up in the air, if you moved it to a higher place, it's going to be a little higher. I just wanted to ask,
We
is it going to be
filed,
the same site?
Mr. Riley filed a height elevation certificate, and it is still 29.
And you can look at that online, sir, okay?
Okay,
Thank you. Appreciate it.
thanks a lot.
Yep.
Just through the chair, if I could just share my screen real quick, I think I could clear
No,
up a
I
lot of.
think we're all set with that, because we've well exceeded the 5 minutes for that one. And
Understood.
we're going to move on,
Understood.
but thank you.
Yes.
It's, okay, so where are we? Questions from the board? Oh, no, did you have any rebuttal from any of the letters?
The first
from
letter.
the letter?
The first letter
Did
from
you wanna do
the
that?
Wardells, their biggest concern, I think, is the road.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to remind everyone that there's a 4-month period that there can be no construction trucks in there.
Okay,
so.
yeah, that's right. Okay, so questions from the board. David Veach. Does anybody
I
have
have no
any questions? We're going to do it that way for this one, since we already heard this one recently. Does anyone have any questions? No? Paul, please, go ahead.
I'll move to close the hearing and move into deliberations.
Dave Veach seconds and votes yes.
I vote yes.
All votes yes.
Ginny votes yes.
As do I. Okay, deliberations. Ginny?
I agree with Mr. Ford. This does not appear to have triggered any new metrics. In fact, there are 3 improvements that I want to make sure Mr. Hyde hears. The improvements were to setbacks, coverage, and gross floor area, so I would approve.
Okay, Steve, deliberations?
Yeah, I don't have any problems with this. It's not often that somebody comes in and asks for a reduction from the original proposal. I know it's very small, but I don't have any issues with this. I think it's a good project.
Great, Lee?
Yeah, I agree with my colleagues. I think it's, I like the new design a lot. I think it's a sleeker, simpler design. It's more beachy and it fits in very well at this site.
Very good. Paul?
Yes, we're very familiar with this lot. We've spent a lot of time on it over the years, and we're familiar with the design. I think it's an improvement. I don't think it's substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood.
And Mr. Nixon?
No comment.
No comment? Okay. Go ahead, Ed.
No issues.
And David Veach?
Yet another example of Mr. Ford's office bringing us a reduction in the size of a waterfront property. What else is there to say?
And taking it out of the flood zone. Boo. Okay, so, Paul?
I'll move to close the hearing and move into
Oh,
deliberations.
we already did that.
Oh, we did that, by golly. All right, I'll move to approve the application as submitted with the conditions that all construction activity and vehicles be contained on site or at neighboring property with the permission of the property owner. That between June 1st and October 1st, no construction activity of any type shall be allowed. No, any structure accessory to the single-family dwelling shall require approval from the Zoning Board of Appeals. And 4, prior to the issuance of a certificate of use and occupancy, the culvert shall be inspected and restored to its original condition, or current condition, prior to the start of construction.
Dave Veach seconds and votes yes.
And Dave Nixon?
Well, I vote yes, but I don't think we need to go through the conditions again.
We already did.
I know it, but nothing changed.
Okay, well,
All votes yes.
Ginny?
Ginny votes yes.
As do I. It's unanimous. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Okay,
Appreciate your
thank you.
time.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to just finish up with our prior application, 66 of Thelma, and then we're going to take a 5-minute break. So, welcome back, Mr. Norcross.
Thank you. Appreciate your patience. In talking to the Heralds and their design team, there's some changes they can make that they think will address the concerns from the board. So in terms of reducing the size, their preference would be to have a continuance if the board would be willing to grant that.
We're gonna have to see.
Okay.
Does anyone want to speak against that idea of a continuance? Go ahead, David Nixon.
Yeah, I think, it's already been continued once, not twice. Because what happens is, not only is it a waste of our time, but it backs up other people who could be in line. So I understand what you're saying, but I think this needs to be withdrawn, rethought through, and resubmitted.
Does anybody else agree with Mr. Nixon? You can, because then we'll know if what we're gonna do. I'm gonna agree with him, so we'd ask you to withdraw.
Okay, sure, then I would ask if we could withdraw without prejudice, please.
Absolutely. Paul?
I'll move to grant the requested withdrawal without prejudice.
Dave Veach seconds and votes yes.
I vote yes.
All votes yes?
Ginny?
Ginny votes yes.
As do I.
Thank-
Actually, that was Lee that was supposed
I
to.
vote yes.
Okay.
Thank
And
you.
she did.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. So at this juncture, we're going to take a 5-minute break, and we will be back with 170 Vineyard Avenue on the other side. Yeah, okay, we are back. This is the continuation of the Zoning Board of Appeals meeting on December 5th, 2024. And our next application is 24-122, David Briggs, care of James Norcross, 170 Vineyard Ave, whenever Sarah's ready.
Application number 24-122, David Briggs, care of James M. Norcross Esquire, P.O. Box 707, Chatham, Mass. 02633. Owner of property located at 170 Vineyard Avenue, also shown in the Town of Chatham's Assessor's Map 10D, Block 4, Lot D 114. The applicant seeks to enlarge, extend, or change a non-conforming dwelling on a non-conforming lot via the demolition of the existing dwelling and the construction of a new dwelling. The existing dwelling is non-conforming in that it is located 13.9 feet from the westerly abutter and entirely within the Coastal Conservancy District, floodplain elevation 11. The proposed dwelling will be non-conforming in that it will be located entirely within the Coastal Conservancy District where a 50-foot setback is required. Also proposed is the reconfiguration of an existing driveway as allowed by special permit. The existing building coverage is 1,276 square feet, 68%, and the proposed building coverage is 1,582 square feet, 84%, where 15%, but not more than 2,800 square feet is the maximum allowed. The lot is non-conforming in that it contains 1,877 square feet of buildable upland, where 20,000 square feet is required in the R20 zoning district. A special permit is required under Mass General Law, Chapter 48, Sections 6 and 9, and Sections 5B and 8D 2B of the protective bylaw.
Attorney Norcross, welcome back.
Thank you. Good evening now, I guess. Jamie Norcross, representing David Briggs. The architect, Gordon Clark, is participating remotely. I believe he's on there, along with Kieran Healy, who is from BSC Group, who's the engineer. So Mr. Briggs bought this property back in May of 2023, and as Sarah read, the proposal is to raise the existing structure and to build a new structure. It's a unique property as it's 15,000 square feet in size, which doesn't make it unique in and of itself, but only about 1,800 square feet is located outside of the floodplain, as you see the line go through the site plan. The lot is located in the R20 zoning district and therefore non-conforming as to size, and as a result of the size and the floodplain location, it lacks the required amount of buildable upland. The existing structure is non-conforming, is located within the setback to the west lot line, and as a result of the property being located within the floodplain, it's over the allowable building coverage. If you saw the building coverage numbers look a little bit scary, it's not nearly as large as what's shown there, but that's based on 1,800 square feet of the lot being outside the floodplain. The proposed structure will meet all dimensional setbacks and will meet the height requirement of the zoning bylaw. The footprint of the structure is increasing by only about 300 square feet, and as a result of the vast majority of the lot being located within the floodplain, it will remain non-conforming as to building coverage. In terms of those numbers, again, if you're going off the upland, which is 1,800 square feet, our numbers are 68%, currently 84%, but again, I think that's a lot deceiving. If you go off the size of the lot, 15,000 square feet, the existing coverage is 8.5% and the proposed is 10.6%. So it's really not that big of a change in terms of the footprint of the structure. A couple aspects to highlight relative to the setbacks and the building height. The street setback to Vineyard Ave is at 26 feet, as you see on Kieran's plan. This is measured to the stairs for the proposed deck on the first floor. If measuring to the house itself, the setback is well over 30 feet. Similarly, the setback to the west lot line, the back of the home, is just over 15 feet, which again is to the deck. As measured to the home, it's an additional 10 feet or so off that lot line, so about 25 feet off the back property line. In terms of the height, the ability to adjust is limited based on the structure being in the floodplain. Based on building code requirements, and if you have questions on this, Kieran can explain it much better than I, but first floor elevation for this property would essentially have to be up at elevation 14. In this case, the elevation is about 1.5 feet higher than that, which is to allow sufficient headroom for the drive-under garage. So while the structure is going up in height, this is largely driven by the floodplain requirements. The applicant has tried to keep the height down as much as possible. There's 8-foot ceiling heights on the first floor and 7'6" ceiling heights on the second floor. And as you see from a lot of your plans, that's pretty modest by current standards for ceiling heights. Seems to be my lot in life tonight. There's a lot of letters that you're going to read. So objection to the additional living area. Well, one of the concerns, excuse me, was the additional living area on the first and second floor. And response to this is the fact that the basement cannot be used for any living area or for mechanicals. It does result in an increased area on the first and second floor as you're trying to have some additional living space. You have to place the mechanicals, can't go in the basement. So that creates a larger footprint than if you could use that basement for some of those aspects. Gordon, if you could please just go through the design for the board. Gordon might not be there. Well, if he shows up, we'll have him go through that. Otherwise, moving along to the criteria. Number one, adequacy of the size of the site. Applicant believes the size of the site is adequate for the proposal. As I mentioned, the structure will meet all dimensional setbacks and the height requirement of the zoning bylaw. As I mentioned, also, total coverage, if we're looking at 15,000 square feet, our lot coverage is 10.6%, our building coverage. So again, it's not huge numbers at all in terms of coverage, looking at the actual size of the lot as opposed to just the area that's outside the floodplain. Compatibility of the size of the structure with neighboring properties. Again, we have some letters that I guess disagree with this conclusion, but we think it's rather compatible in terms of size. Many of the homes along Vineyard Ave and the surrounding areas were originally built in the 50s, but a number of them have been renovated or rebuilt in the last 20 years. The gross floor area analysis that's submitted with this, unlike the prior application I was here for tonight, we're very much consistent with the numbers that you see in the neighborhood in terms of gross floor area, and our lot size, 15,000 square feet, is also quite consistent, with lot size in the area. The height is going up by 5 feet. As I mentioned, a lot of that is due to the floodplain building requirements, and the footprint is only increasing by 300 square feet. Extent of the proposed increase in nonconforming nature, our building coverage number is going up because we're increasing by 300 square feet. That's the only additional nonconformity. Suitability of the site, we believe it's suitable for the project. Construction work can be completed without negative impact on the neighboring properties. It was reviewed favorably by the Conservation Commission, and you have a letter from the Planning Board who had no issue with the gravel driveway. I should mention on the gravel driveway, in terms of impervious surface, it will remain a gravel as opposed to asphalt, and the size is actually going to be reduced by about 500 square feet. There's a portion of the driveway at the back that's going to be taken away. There's a portion that goes over onto the neighboring property that's going to be removed. I should also mention the shed that you see in the back that's not on our property, that's going to be removed as well, and that was a condition of the Conservation Commission. Impact of scale, siding, and mass, neighborhood visual character. And a lot of this I've addressed. I mean, I think it's going up in height. I don't think the overall height really is significant. It's listed as, I believe it's 29 feet, but again, that's measured from average grade. Lowest adjacent grade is what you have to do in the floodplain. So that sort of skews the overall height numbers a bit. If you measured it from average grade, which is what you traditionally do if a lot's not in the floodplain, our height is around 26 feet. Setbacks, as I mentioned, we're 26 feet to the stairs on the front, over 30 feet if you measure to the house. The footprint size is not increasing by much at all, 300 square feet. And the topography of the lot sort of lends itself to, number one, the drive-under garage that's being constructed. We can't touch the grade, essentially, because it's in the floodplain, so that's really a natural feature. There's one there now. We're going to keep the drive-under garage, and there's similar lots in the neighborhood that have a drive-under garage. And the topography also, as viewed from Vineyard Ave in front of the home, the grade is higher there, which again I think limits the impact of the additional size of the home. The structure is seen from the west, so the back lot line where the shed is. Clearly that shows the most massing. However, that side of the property contains significant vegetative screening, and there is a vacant lot between the property. It looks like it's an unbuildable lot between our lot line and Horseshoe Lane, which screens the additional size. We're compatible, single-family residence in a residential neighborhood. Property will be connected to town sewer, has town water, and will have appropriate drainage. 8, 9, and 10, again, we comply with all those requirements. It's not a formula business. 12, in this case, I do have to address extent of the lateral expansion proposed. As I mentioned, it'll have a lateral expansion of 300 square feet. This expansion, again, as I mentioned, is largely because we can't have any mechanicals or living area in the basement. The extent to which the lateral expansion impacts the impervious area of the site, we believe it will have a negligible impact in the impervious area of the site. other improvements being made, including a reduction of the existing gravel driveway by 500 square feet, and the construction of a flood-compliant foundation, I would suggest offset this increase and result in net benefit. So in summation, it's bigger than what's there now. Again, I think some of the height numbers that you see, again, if you look at it from average grade as opposed to lowest adjacent grade, it's not as tall as it may seem when measuring from lowest adjacent grade. And I think given the topography in the lot, it can support the design. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Oh, thank you. Is there anybody here on Microsoft Teams that wishes to speak in favor of this application? If so, please raise your hand. Seeing none? None? Okay, I will read the correspondences. We have 3 from internal agencies, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 from people in the community, and I only need to read 7 out of the 8 because one of the people is going to address us in person. So, Arthur Spru, the chair of the planning board, tells us that the planning board met November 25, 2024, and they reviewed the request for comment. After the review, the board voted unanimously to send a positive recommendation with the condition that the driveway shall be constructed of permeable material and shall be constructed in a manner which permits the unobstructed flow of water. And if we have any questions, we should contact the town planner, Christine Grady. Next, we have a note from the Conservation Commission from November 7th, 2024. They tell us that if the project is approved, the project will be revised and conditioned to meet the performance standards under the Wetlands Protection Act and all other appropriate acts. And then we have a note from Judith Giorgio, our health agent. She reviewed the plan to demolish the existing dwelling and build a 5-bedroom dwelling at this property. The dwelling must be connected to sewer as part of the approval for the 5-bedroom dwelling. They are not increasing the sewer flow at the property, and that was received on 11/27/2024. Next, we have a note from Larry Palmerton, and that was received on December 3, 2024. Let's see. He tells us that the proposed excessive expansion of the structural dimensions and lot coverage that were published by the zoning board are unacceptable in any situation. In addition, what has not been readily apparent is that the height of the new structure is estimated to be about 7 feet taller than the current house, representing a 30% increase. Finally, ponding of water already occurs in the back of the lot. Heavy rains, which will be made worse with potential runoff occurring to neighboring lots and to the freshwater pond nearby, will ultimately lead to Oyster River. While in particular cases there may be justification for varying the standards of zoning and conservation, however, that does not apply to this property. A minor amount of due diligence by the recent new owner would have revealed that the current structure is non-compliant and that the lot is severely undersized for development, and that the property is located within the Coastal Conservancy District. This owner is now apparently asking the community to accept a proposal that exceeds and is out of character with the community standards of the streetscape. It's also worth noting that local developers of nearby properties have worked with the neighborhood Oyster River Hills Association. From the early planning stages, they have made compromises and gained the neighborhood support and ZBA approvals. This type of discussion has not occurred with the proposal for 170 Vineyard, while simple maintenance of the exterior has been absent and it's been an eyesore to the neighborhood. Only a new structure of substantially the same dimensions, coverage, and character as the current structure would be supported, and he lives at 50 Horseshoe Lane. Next, we have a note from the Oyster River Association, also Robert Adamo, President, 11 Meadowview Road in Chatham. This letter was written on 12/2/2024, and they are informing us that the Board of Directors of the Oyster Hill Rivers Association has recently reviewed plans for the proposed redevelopment of the property at 170 Vineyard, which the ORHA is in a butter. They have 41 residents along Meadowview Road and secondary streets extending from Barn Hill Road and ending at but not including Vineyard Ave. The association owns a narrow parcel of common land that abuts 170, and it's bordered by the other side And along the southwest rear corner of 170, it's a low-lying area that drains onto the association common area and in our private storm drainage system. The ORHA roads and stormwater drainage systems are private and owned and maintained by the association. Our input includes two specific areas: environmental. The drainage is of concern, given the increased size and excessive coverage of the proposed structures in the buildable area of the lot compared to current structures. During heavy rains, ponding will develop on the association parcel, and that'll be exacerbated. The lot should be regraded at the southwest corner to retain all stormwater runoff on the 170 Vineyard lot. The proposed house is showing excessive decks in the front and rear, which creates more impervious runoff and increases the massing of the structure, which, in comparison to other homes in the neighborhood, consider reducing these decks. Next, shed. The association previously agreed to relinquish rights to the shed if it were demolished by the new owner. The deadline for removal was established as July 2024. No action was taken. Notice was sent to the owner. At this time, the association proposes purchasing the shed. I don't think this is particularly relevant, so I am going to conclude that they do not speak for individual abutters. They speak for this association. Okay. Huntley Harrison, 154 Vineyard Ave, writes to us. I'm writing on, let's see, recently. I am writing to express my concern with the proposal to enlarge and otherwise make changes to this non-conforming dwelling on a non-conforming lot. I am not an architect, but there is just so much wrong with these plans. The proposed house is not in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. It is much too large for the lot in an imposing design. First and second floor, full-length decks and a garage portion that looks like an attached second house. The house is taller than the existing house. The north drywall placement for the downspouts in the floodplain are in the floodplain. And it's very close to my property, with 5 bedrooms, put undue stress on the sewer, with a question mark. Frankly, I have great concern about these proposed changes. The interior design of the house with 5 bedrooms and 4.5 baths looks suspiciously like a rental setup for a house that will soon be flipped. This is a quiet neighborhood and a rental capable of housing that many people would not, that they wouldn't welcome that. Also, so far, the owner has shown little interest in upkeep of the property. He has not had any goodwill with the neighbors. A tree fell in the front yard and it's still sitting there untouched. A lot currently looks abandoned. I truly feel that the way this house is currently designed and the way the owner has kept up the property does not bode well now or in the future with the neighbors or the neighborhood at large. Thank you in advance for considering my note. Next, we have a note from 170 Vineyard Road, no, let's see, from 58 Horseshoe Lane, Peter Van Amson. He writes to tell us that in reference to this application, he's the abutter at 58 Horseshoe. He would like to express 3 concerns. The proposal provides an increase in total lot coverage 33% higher, 33.1, given the almost entire lot is in the floodplain and the lot is within the 100-foot buffer to the pond. It's extremely important that drainage is properly engineered. This coverage is 262% of the lot, excluding Conservancy District. The plan should require engineering confirmation that drainage post-construction is adequate, not worse than it is today. The current plans as presented do not give any indication about that. Front and rear elevation plans drawings for the proposed structure are inconsistent with the second floor plan. The second floor indicated finished space with a normal height ceiling for the entire floor plate. The elevations show a gap between the northern and southern portion of the second floor. The proposed plans show a new building will be visually much more imposing than the current home. The proposed structure has a floor plate that is 24% larger and 100% larger at full second floor height, in addition to being 4 to 6 feet taller at full height than the current home. There are no measurements for total elevation of current homes provided. Given that the lot is non-conforming, a total of 15,000 square feet, where 20,000 is of buildable upland is required. The existing building envelope should not be so significantly exceeded. Next, we have a note from Allison Carr, but she is going to speak to us in the flesh in a moment. Next, we have a note from December 1st, 2024, from Carol Campbell. She lives at 200 Vineyard Ave, and she's writing in regard to this project. It's the first time I've written in objection to any building issue on my street. In general, I support all the neighbors' efforts to upgrade and improve homes, and all recent work on my street has been designed in keeping with the existing character of the street. The proposed plans for 170, in my opinion, are not in character with the rest of the street or even with the town of Chatham. The proposed home takes up nearly the entire lot, crowds the neighboring homes, is extremely close to the street, and overbearing and unattractive. In effect, it consists of not one, but two multi-story buildings, which is excessive and unnecessary. My extended family lives in a community in New Jersey, so I am very familiar with the strategy of building a mini mansion on a quarter-acre lot. I think most of us are here because we wish to avoid that particular aesthetic. I understand that the property owner wishes to get a return on their investment, but their failure to do due diligence is not the problem of the residents of Vineyard Ave. I believe that their indifference to the neighborhood is well demonstrated by their current complete neglect of the property. I hope you'll take this into consideration. Next, we have a note from Tom Benevilla, 150 Meadowview Road in Chatham, received November 29th, 2024. I am in receipt of your letter of November 14th, 2024, concerning the application for David Briggs for a special permit. I have reviewed the material provided online, including the site plan. Based on my review, I want to express my strong objection in bold letters to the project as currently conceived. Several years ago, we renovated and expanded our house into a year-round residence. We also needed approval from the ZBA, and I vividly recall that our plans were evaluated in a large part on whether our modified house would maintain the character of the neighborhood and whether it would be architecturally consistent with other nearby houses. In short, whether or not it would improve the aesthetic of our beautiful town. I believe the current plan fails on all these counts. It appears to take a current non-conforming dwelling on a non-conforming lot and make it doubly non-conforming with all respects. Simply put, the house is simply too large for the size of the lot. Most offensive, in my view, is that the proposed height of the house, which adds some 10 feet to the existing house, virtually across its entire length. I hope the ZBA takes this opportunity to prevent this kind of tasteless construction. Since the property changed hands, it has become, in the eyes of many, an eyesore through the lack of maintenance and neglect. It would be a tragedy if one eyesore was replaced by another through the issuance of a special permit. Next, we have a shorter note from Judy Patterson from 119 Vineyard Ave. I'm writing to express my concern. The new structure will be in the flood zone. The house does not fit with the character of the neighborhood. It's way too big. I'm concerned after looking at the current plans, the owner may decide to put an apartment within the house. I would like my comments to go on record as I oppose the size and design of this house. And that could be it. It is. Just make sure. That had some pictures attached. So now we will say, is there anybody here or on Microsoft Teams who wishes to ask a question or to speak against? And I will recognize Allison Carr. Please go up to the mic.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Ours is another one of those neighborhoods that needs a little bit of protection from supersizing. The houses on our street are 1- and 2-story homes, several 1-story homes, which I don't think I realized until I specifically watched when I went up and down for a dog walk. If you start at Smith Street and head down to the water where we have a town landing, we're about 50% occupied year-round. It's a friendly neighborhood. We know each other. We're friends with each other. We know each other's kids. Our dogs are friends. Odd, but it's true. But it's modest. And this design is not. It is a significant increase in size. I agree with my neighbor's criticisms. It's also not a Cape Cod-style home. Those decks that sit way above street level, to me, look like a peanut gallery. As someone who would stop and chat with all of the neighbors, right? How do you stop and chat with somebody who's up a half story? It's really inconsistent with the rest of the design. Most of the homes, we've lived here for about 20 years full-time. We've owned our property for almost 24. Most of the homes going Smith Street on down have been at some point expanded or renovated. They've gone from 50s cottages to year-round homes, but they've been done modestly, and this current plan is not modest. I don't think many of our homes have 5 bedrooms, 4.5 baths. Let's see. I'll leave the conservation issues to other people, but I share and would express personally my concern about fit and character of the neighborhood. It's a lovely neighborhood. It's a modest neighborhood, and this house really does not make any sense. Thank you.
Thank you, miss. And anybody else wants to ask a question or has a comment against this application online or here? I don't see any, oh, yes, sir? Please. Okay, well, if, okay, well, you have to wait till you get to the mic, and we'll give you 1 minute since I read your letter.
Who's the guy on the screen? Is that Mr. Brink?
Huntley Harrison, 154 Vineyard Avenue in Chatham. Just a brief comment. I think the owner, by not being here, has spoken very loudly about his.
Can we just stick to the criteria and not personal attacks? You know, we gave you a chance, we read your letter. If I had known you wanted to talk as well, but just add in anything that has to go with the criteria. Are you familiar with the criteria that we consider?
No, nothing on the criteria.
All right, thank you. Anybody else here wishes to speak against the application or has a specific question? Seeing none, we will go to questions from the board. David?
If I may, just
Oh,
have a
yes,
moment.
yes, I apologize.
No
I always
problem.
forget that.
Kieran, if you don't mind, if you could just explain a couple things. Number one, the height in terms of how the floodplain impacts what can happen in terms of the first floor elevation, and then also if you could explain the drainage features that you've put on the property to address any issues relative to runoff. Oh. I think you're muted.
Is that better?
Yes.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Kieran Healy. I'm a land surveyor with the BSC Group, representing the owner. To speak specifically about the drainage, we have provided 2 500-gallon dry wells with 4 feet of stone all the way around them, one on the north side and one on the south side. That is a substantial volume of water and is more than adequate to capture the entire rain runoff that might come off of this particular building. On the regards to the building height, the flood zone in this area is elevation 11. The new Mass Building Code requires what's known as 2 foot of freeboard, which is 2 foot of safety, and that is down to the lowest water resistant material, which means that the joists need to be above that elevation. So we have elevation 11 for the FEMA flood zone, 2 foot of safety puts it at 13, and then 1 more foot for the joist. So that's a minimum floor level of 14. That doesn't give us any room for ductwork in the basement or crawl space area, so where the garage is. So as a result, the building is at 15 to allow that ductwork to be placed and comply with the FEMA regulations. This also allows the drive on the garage to meet the same as the existing building has that drive on the garage. Other than that, I'd be glad to answer any other questions you may have.
Great, thank you, Kieran. Just a couple points. We heard some numbers on the height. The actual increase in height is around 5 feet, not 7 or 10. And as you've heard from Kieran, a lot of that, or a vast majority of that is impacted by the requirements of the floodplain construction. I understand it's a bigger house than what exists now, excuse me, but I don't think it's as big as people are making it out to in terms of the square footage. It's 300 square feet larger than what's there now. The height is going up by 5 feet. The design, I guess, folks might have an issue with the design, but I don't think it really goes to the massing of the structure. The deck on the second floor facing Vineyard Ave, there's a peak of the water from there, so that was the intent of the deck. I think the decks also allow for some exterior area for recreation because, again, in this lot, you can't do any change of the grade, so there's not a whole lot of lawn area, so that allows an area for the folks to recreate in the front and the back as they're a bit limited on the lawn space. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Questions from the board? Steve?
Well, I guess the first thing I would like to know is, apparently the owners owned this house since last May, I believe, 23?
Yes.
Can someone explain why it hasn't been maintained in a year and a half? I mean, you can still maintain an unoccupied house and make it look like something other than what that house looks like.
Right, no, I appreciate that. The plan was to have plans done far earlier than they were actually completed. So I think Mr. Briggs was relying on the fact he thought he'd have stuff submitted and up and running a long time ago. And unfortunately not having a house down here already, he's not nearby. But again, it doesn't excuse the condition, but that's the explanation. It just took far longer to get the plans done than he anticipated.
And is there access, direct access from, I guess, the main house to the area that's above the garage?
There is access from the first floor to that area. There is not access on the second floor to that area.
Okay,
if
so
that
there's a
answers your question.
stairway
There's a
going up to
stairway
the-
from the first, but there's not access from the second floor.
Okay.
As Mr. Briggs explained, his thought process there was having a guest area if folks are staying that they could have a little bit of privacy.
Okay.
It's not intended for an apartment to address one of the concerns that was raised.
All right, and then the other thing, maybe, it's just a typo, I don't know, but on page A1, which is the first floor plan, there's what is called a master bathroom, sort of in the lower right-hand corner of the page. And then, so I would assume the bedroom that has access to the master bath is also a master bedroom or a primary bedroom. And then there's also another master bedroom or primary bedroom and a master bath, which appears to be above the garage. So are there two primary bedrooms and bathrooms?
I see Gordon Clark has joined us on the architect, so if I may ask him to address that question, please. Gordon?
Yeah, frequently when we do homes on the Cape or as second homes, a lot of times we'll design a house with the ability to have two master suites. And the first floor master bedroom is smaller. The second one is larger. Sometimes they're used as a guest room. Depending on the ability of the owner to get to the second floor. If they don't have that ability, then they can use the first floor bedroom. They expressed a desire, Mr. Briggs did, to have a second floor master suite, which was a little bit more elaborate and separate from the rest of the house. And we had labeled the other one as a second master. Essentially, that's the reason behind the labeling. I don't know if that answers your question adequately, but that was the thought behind it.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, questions, Lee?
I don't really have any questions, thank you.
Okay, Paul?
No questions.
David Nixon?
No questions.
And Ed Acton, questions?
No questions.
No? And David Veach, questions?
Yeah, so I just have a couple of questions. So Jay, is that 2-foot of freeboard? Is this something new on the floodplain regulations or?
The new building code, which is mandatory as of July 1st, 2025, would be 2 feet of freeboard in an A zone rather than 1 foot.
Okay.
But that's to the lowest floor. That's not to the bottom of the joist, so.
It's to the floor,
To the
not,
lowest floor,
not to the joists, okay.
correct.
So, given that at elevation 11, they could put that floor if they, and meet the requirements at elevation 14.
They could, I would never encourage anyone to
No.
lower a floor in a floodplain just because we don't know what's gonna happen down
Right,
the road.
no, I mean, I think it makes sense for them
They
to go,
could.
to the bottom of the joist. It probably makes more sense in many respects. And also, Jay, just to, because the plan wasn't dimensioned in that regard, but there's kind of an awning over the entry to the garages, and that needs to be if it doesn't exceed 2 feet in width, and it doesn't count on ground coverage, is that true?
2 feet in depth, yes,
If it does exceed 2 feet in depth, it has to count
towards building
coverage on
coverage,
the ground.
right.
Okay, well, just to flag that for the,
Thank you.
And just to reiterate on the building coverage, the building coverage isn't taken on the whole lot, it's taken on the upland portion of the lot. So I know sometimes people compare it to the whole lot, but
no, all of the, as the ad states, those percentages
Right.
are relative to the buildable upland.
Right.
Okay. And I think those are the only questions I had.
Okay, great. Anybody else? No? Paul? Oh, I'm sorry, Virginia. Yeah.
No, it's okay. Jamie, you mentioned in your narrative, that the changes are kind of minimal, right? Increase to gross floor area is only 151 square feet.
That's not true. Sorry, Ginny, I noticed that.
Oh, okay.
And it's not true. If you go further into the information on the sheets, the gross floor area they're proposing is 4746, not 3164.
Okay.
Well,
I couldn't figure out how they could get 316 square foot increase in footprint
That's-
and only 151. Didn't add up.
I guess here's, if I explain some of the, so the basement isn't count toward the gross floor area because it's in the floodplain. So
But
that's
this-
how we come up with the 3,000 and change.
I understand
So-
that, but gross floor square footage was, as applied to the initial basement, it wasn't counted as
Oh,
well.
I understand what you're saying, okay, yeah.
So I understand.
So that's wasn't, I mean, that's where the number comes from in terms of the definition, but yeah.
Yeah, but that's, I think, another one of those modifications we can make.
Yeah.
We don't need it made in the presentation as if it were the
Okay.
case. When we ask for gross square footage, that's what we ask for, so.
Okay.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Dave, because I was looking at the information on that cover sheet, and I couldn't reconcile how it was not, the image of it is so much larger than the original that couldn't reconcile that. Okay, so my question is, that's related to was one of the reasons the height has to go up, and which is part of the objection to the size and the mass, is because of the floodplain. So was there consideration to renovating this property? Why wasn't that possible? Because then you could keep the height down.
Gordon, could you explain the interior ceiling heights in terms of that option?
Yeah, the existing house, on the first floor, I believe we had a 7'6", 7'4" to 7'6" ceiling height. The floor joists were less 2x8s. The basement had so little height in it, you had to duck to go underneath the girt in there. So the house was lower on the lot. If you look at the height, I think the height of the ridge from the height of the floor of the garage is 24 feet. On the second floor, this had a 9/12 pitch on the roof. On the second floor, there wasn't even legal headroom for a bedroom under current code. It's only 6'11". So it doesn't even meet the code for height. I believe you have to have a minimum of 7 feet, which this house does not have. The windows on the front of the house, if you look at it, are set at 5'4" off the floor. You can't even look out the windows if you're standing up in the house unless you're quite short. So a lot of this, the existing house, there were a lot of impractical reasons to renovate it. If there was a renovation, we did look at it. We measured the house and drew the whole house looking at it to renovate it. But the foundation is in such poor, such poor condition. There's cracks in it, there's diagonal stress cracks in it, evidence of, water leakage into it. It's concrete block instead of poured concrete. If we were to add any second floor additional loads to it, we would have had to either jack the whole house and take it off the foundation and replace the foundation, or put structural supports all the way around the perimeter of it, which we've done that in some cases if the structure was worth saving. The dimensions of the house aren't a whole lot different other than the height. The existing house, including the deck that protrudes out 4 feet, is about 58 feet long. The proposed house is 59 feet and some change. The height is from the where the grade where the floor in the basement is I believe 4 feet higher. The existing house is 26 feet wide. The proposed house is 28 feet, so we increased it by 2 feet. Although this house looks larger on the face, if we were to try to make this house with 28-foot base, a standard cape, and we were to use a 12-12 pitch, which a lot of standard capes use right now, we would have been 2'9" over the 30-foot limit of the building limit. So we couldn't use a standard just gable roof, which would match what's there now. So we went to the gambrel style design to keep the height of the house down. Given the floodplain, you can't average the grade either. You have to take it from the lowest point on the lot if it's in the flood zone. If it's a standard lot and it's not in the floodplain, you can average the grade, so we would have had a little bit more room to work with. So we had a number of issues that we had to deal with to try to get a workable house. And like I say, the house was in such bad condition, that's why we didn't.
Oh, Gordon, I think she's happy with the answer. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay.
Oh, no, sorry, if you're not.
You can definitely ask another one.
Yeah, I wanted to, because you were mentioning the ceiling heights were inadequate in the renovation idea, as well as a number of other things. I heard that.
Yeah,
What,
and we kept ceiling heights at, the first floor is we did increase that to 8 feet, which is not an unusual height. The second floor is only 7'6".
Okay,
And that
so-
leaves a minimal amount of height left to put any HVAC equipment. We have to have the utilities out of the basement. Right now, the furnace is in the basement.
Yeah.
We lost a pretty sizable space on the first floor for a utility room because we had to put the furnace and the water heater and, the utilities pretty much in the center of the house up on the first floor. So
okay.
I hope this answers the question.
Yes, thank you. You did, thank you.
Lee, questions? Did I ask you already? Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Paul?
I'll move to close the hearing and move into deliberations.
Dave each seconds and votes yes.
Dave Nixon?
Paul votes yes.
Ginny votes yes.
As do I. Okay, deliberations. Ginny, we'll just go right back to you.
Okay, well, kind of where I was going with my questions was to try to reconcile this. I mean, this is proposed, and this is existing, and it's hugely different. And then I'm looking at the numbers, they're not that different. And so we are talking about 5 feet in height because of the floodplain, which is why I asked about the possibility of renovation, because that's really part of the issue, is the height that you need to have. Your ceiling heights at 8 feet first floor, which is what I think I heard the architect say, and 7'6" on the second floor is not outrageous. But I am having a hard time reconciling that because I do not think it fits, this particular proposal fits in that neighborhood.
Steve, deliberations.
Well, again, we have a neighborhood of, pretty, tidy, kept Cape Cod-style ranch houses and, you know, sort of traditional Cape houses. And the design of this, I don't want to insult anybody, but it's awful, as far as I'm concerned.
You think the massing, are you talking about the massing, basically?
I don't, this house doesn't fit into the neighborhood whatsoever, I don't think.
Okay, all right.
So I think it's detrimental to everything that's around it.
All right, and we're gonna go right over to Dave Veach for another aspect of ideas.
Well, I'm sorry to, I need to elaborate a little bit on that to some degree. So overall, and I think that the neighbors' concerns reflect this. I'm sorry, this house does not fit the neighborhood. It doesn't fit the neighborhood. And it's, so so first of all, it's the upper pitch of the roof is 3.5 in 12, which is pretty shallow. Under normal circumstances. Now, I understand they have to meet the 30-foot requirement from the lowest average or lowest grade. But that's the condition that they need to meet. And they have made a decision, and not an unwise decision, to elevate the first floor level above what they need to do in order to meet the requirements of the code. They've added an extra 1.5 feet or so. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea. But the overall effect of this house is this is a 2-story house, a full 2-story house with some basically applied rakes and some things on the exterior to help break it up and make it appear to be a gambrel. But it's really visually, it looks a little bit squashed down, which it is, and it's basically a full 2-story. If you look at the dimensions of the second floor and the first floor, they are the same. So those walls, the dormers, if you will, on the second floor are in the same plane as the walls on the first floor. And you know, sometimes that can work, and it's a tricky thing. But if those rakes, if those built-out eaves are not substantial enough in appearance, then it looks like a 2-story house that's been tried to look like a 1.5 or a 1 3/4. Also, I don't think having those decks, the size of those decks, the extent of those decks, the deck on the back, fine, but the front of the house, it just adds to the visual impact of it. And I don't go all up and down that street in that whole neighborhood, and I don't see anything that I could say that this relates to. And so for that reason, I can't support it.
Ed's deliberations. If you were voting.
If I was voting, I have to say I agree with Dave. I think there is a way to, take some of the height out. It's in the floodplain, so you're not allowed to put any utilities in the basement. If your HVAC is going to be on the first floor, I don't think you need to put ductwork in the basement. You can simply run it up the walls, put it in the ceiling, and there's a foot you can reduce right there. In addition, the applicant should speak to the neighbors and should, have their input. I agree, the decks on the front of the house are not in keeping with the rest of the neighborhood, so it wouldn't have my vote as well.
All right, David Nixon.
Yeah, I'm not going to belabor this. The 3 individuals who spoke before me said it all.
Actually, 4.
4,
Yeah, 4. Now we'll go to 5, Lee, and then we'll go to Paul after that.
I'll be very brief as well. I agree with Dave Veach. The mass is criteria number 5. It's the mass, and I think it's the height, which unfortunately is because of the flood zone, but I think the porch is on the front. I think it adds to the mass. I think the two-story garage adds to the mass. And I'm not voting on this one, but I would have trouble supporting it.
And Paul?
Yeah, I agree with the prior comments. So, criteria 5, the applicant says there will be no negative impact on neighborhood visual character. There will be negative impact on neighborhood visual character, and it will be detrimental, substantially detrimental to the neighborhood. So I don't think this design fits at all with anything else that's on the street.
Mr. Norcross?
Hearing that, we asked if we may withdraw without prejudice, please.
Sure. Paul?
I'll move to grant the requested withdrawal without prejudice.
David seconds and votes yes.
And Mr. Nixon, you vote yes for withdrawal without prejudice?
I do.
All votes yes?
Ginny?
Yes.
As do I.
Great, thank you.
so much. All right. Does anyone need a break, or we'll just plow through the next two, or we'll be? Next application is 70 High Point Drive, 24-127, William G. Litchfield Esquire.
Application number 24-127, 70 High Point Drive Realty Trust, care of William G. Litchfield Esquire, 330 Orleans Road, North Chatham, Mass. 02650. Owner of property located at 70 High Point Drive, also shown in the Town of Chatham's Assessor's Map 13K, Block 21, Lot R29. The applicant seeks to enlarge, extend, or change a conforming dwelling in a non-conforming lot via the partial demolition and construction of additions. The existing dwelling and proposed addition comply with all bulk and dimensional requirements of the bylaw, but is considered a substantial alteration, and under the second except clause of Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 6, such substantial alteration requires the grant of a special permit. The existing building coverage is 1,668 square feet, 8%, and the proposed building coverage is 2,372 square feet, 11.4%, where 2,850 square feet is the maximum allowed. The lot is non-conforming in that it contains 20,731 square feet, where 40,000 square feet is required in the R40 zoning district. A special permit is required under Mass General Law, Chapter 48, Section 6, and Section 5B of the protected bylaw.
Welcome, Mr. Litchfield.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the board. Bill Litchfield here on behalf of Rich Szabo, who is still here. The homeowner has remained. With us also tonight is Karen Kempton. You have had a lengthy afternoon, evening, but I thought I might start by asking Karen to give you a brief view of the architecture involved, and then I'll go into the criteria if that's acceptable.
Sure, the relevant criteria would be great.
Would you like me to go straight into that?
Yes.
Okay, Karen won't be offended, and she'll be available to answer any questions. As to adequacy of site, including building coverage and setbacks, we have a typical Riders Cove Landing half-acre lot with very low coverage at 8% and a modest house which meets all dimensional requirements. If you approve the special permit, that will remain true. The site is adequate for the replacement of the addition on the north and a new one on the east or rear side, primarily in a hollow at the end, the rear of the lot, as Sarah has shown there, with coverage 500 square feet less than the maximum allowed and still meeting all setback requirements. As to compatibility of size, on the third page of the handout, we have the relevant numbers up and down High Point and also in the back on Wentworth. We have one of the smallest footprints of adjacent properties where 2850 square feet is allowed. It is compatible. If you approve the special permit, it will remain compatible. A major portion of the addition is at the rear, while increasing living space. It's reasonable. Parenthetically, Rich's mother has some health issues and will be living with them as well. Rich didn't plan on retiring quite so soon, but after the length of this hearing, he may be down here sooner than planned. And in fact, the Szabos do plan on having this as a year-round home. But the coverage, living area, and gross floor area numbers will remain compatible, and it meets all dimensional requirements. As to the extent of increase in nonconformity, there is none. This is a Bjorkland hearing. The lot is non-conforming, but everything that is proposed, it does meet the current requirements. is the suitability of the site. There are no environmental issues, no wetlands or environmental aspects to consider. As to scale, siting, mass, views, and vistas, mass is not really applicable to what's there now, which is some 70 feet back from the street. It's without impact on views and vistas. It has little, if any, impact on the streetscape. That will remain true if you approve the special permit. Karen has provided an appropriate and simple design, which is complementary to the house, with the shed dormer on the street side. The larger portion with the garage is at the rear and is shielded by the house and vegetation on the east and south sides as well. It's without impact on the streetscape, and there's no change in views and vistas. As to compatibility of use, it's residential, eventually year-round. Adequacy of water and sewer, we have town water at Title V for 4 bedrooms. The health agent had a question about the floor plan, and we have addressed that by providing a better and more legible plan of the existing house. The other criteria are not really at issue. What is at issue, as you know, is whether replacing the somewhat awkward north side wing with a more traditional addition on the north side and constructing new living space at the rear above the 2-car garage, and doing so in a manner which is completely compliant with the dimensional and bulk requirements of our bylaw, whether that is substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood than the existing conforming house on a non-conforming lot. As expanded, will still only be at about 80% of allowable coverage. The additions will have minimal impact on streetscape. The visible portion is 75 or 76 feet back from the street, and the garage addition, again, is hidden behind the house. The gross floor area and living area are comparable. It's rare that you've had 3 neighborhood associations comment. You had 2 neighborhood association comments earlier today. I'm pleased to say that the Riders Cove Landing Association has reviewed the plans and has written a brief letter in support of them. So I think that you can, as have some other neighbors. So I don't mean to rush through it, and again, I know Karen would be happy to speak to the plans, but I know you've had a long night, and given the criteria and those plans, I think that you could find the proposed additions, which meet all zoning requirements, will not be substantially detrimental to the neighborhood. In fact, will not be at all detrimental. And I thank you.
And thank you. Is there anybody here on Microsoft Teams that wishes to speak in favor of this application? If so, please make it known. Seeing none, I will read all the short notes. Oh, we do have one. Okay, I'm sorry.
Online, we have Doug that would like to speak.
Doug online.
Oh, hi. This is Doug Flood. I'm at 55 Wentworth, and we're abutters behind the property, and we support the Zabos application.
Great, thank you. Thank you for joining the meeting. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak in favor? No. Okay, very good. We have a note from Judith Giorgio. She's our health agent. She reviewed the plans. Whoop, whoop. If you could just shut that off, whoever's online. I reviewed the plans to renovate and add an addition to this property. It appears that the dwelling will maintain the existing 4-bedroom layout. However, clear plans of the existing dwelling are needed to confirm, and that was on 11/27/2024. Next, we have a note from Lotta PC Land Planners from Connecticut. Let's see what this is. I've received the notice of public hearing above reference item, and I wish you to know that my family and I, oh, I see, it's 85 Wentworth Drive, Elizabeth Ash. I apologize. I have no objections to you granting the special permit. As a neighboring landowner, I support the application. And we have a note from Arnold Lovering, the president of Riders Cove Landing Association, 166 Oldfield Bend. They tell us on 12/4/2024 that they were provided and they reviewed all the information, and they believe the project is an enhancement to the neighborhood, and they fully support the application. Then Clyde Burke Stresser Esquire and Renee from 67 Wentworth tell us on 12/3/2024 they reviewed the plan to renovate, and they believe the project is an enhancement to the neighborhood as a direct abutter to the rear property located at 67 Wentworth, Chatham. My wife and I totally support the application, have owned and occupied our property for 40 years, been very active in the Chatham Association over that period, and I've discussed the project with neighbors, and they believe that it'll be enhancement as well. Then Bruce and Kathleen Everett from 82 High Point Drive tell us on 12/2/2024 that they've reviewed the plans, and they believe the addition is an enhancement to the neighborhood, and the neighbors are all supportive. That concludes the notations that we got. Is there anybody here on Microsoft Teams that wishes to speak against the application or has a specific question? Seeing zero, none. Questions from the board? Are there any? Seeing none. Paul?
I'll move to close the hearing and move into deliberations.
Dave Veach seconds and votes yes.
Yes.
All votes yes.
Ginny votes yes.
As do I. Okay, deliberations. Lee?
I think this is a great project. I mean, this is a very good example of addition, renovation that makes sense in this neighborhood, so.
Steve?
I think it's a good project. It you know, kind of puts the front of the house on the same plane and removes that little bump out, whatever that was. And I think it's a nice project.
And Ginny?
Well, I love this house, and I think it's going to be even better. It's a thoughtful addition, great plans by Karen, meets our criteria.
And Paul?
Yes, I think it clearly fits into the neighborhood with these changes, and it will not be substantially more detrimental.
David Nixon?
I agree.
And Ed Acton?
Meets our criteria.
And David?
And I agree as well.
All right, great. As do I. Paul?
I'll move to approve the application as submitted in terms of construction activity and so forth.
I think this may be an occasion where the seasonal limitation is not required. Having said that, I haven't spoken with Rich directly about it, but he has a very good relationship with his neighbors, so if they have any concerns, I think we would not do summer construction.
We're not going to start until probably mid-August.
It will be a Labor Day construction. Post-Labor Day would be acceptable.
All right. All right, I'll suggest that we approve with the conditions that all construction activity and vehicles be contained on site or at a neighboring property with the permission of the property owner. Between June 30th and Labor Day, no exterior construction will be allowed. No work will be permitted on weekends, and construction activity between 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. only.
Dave Veach seconds and votes yes.
And David Nixon?
Yes.
All votes yes.
Ginny votes yes.
As do I. It's unanimous. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
All right. Last but not least, one more try for Mr. Norcross.
If it was baseball, I'd be pretty good tonight, but. Hall of Fame numbers, but. Yeah.
All right, so this is going to be application 24-123.
Application number 24-123, Stephanie Jordan Haig Revocable Trust, Stephanie Jordan Haig Trustee, care of James M. Norcross Esquire, P.O. Box 707, Chatham, Mass. 02633. Owner of property located at 7 Cranberry Knoll, also shown in the town of Chatham's Assessor's Map 14F, Block 82, Lot F17. The applicant seeks to enlarge, extend, or change a conforming dwelling on a non-conforming lot via the construction of an addition. The existing dwelling and proposed addition will comply with all bulk and dimensional requirements of the bylaw, but is considered a substantial alteration, and under the second except clause of Section 6 of Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, such substantial alteration requires the grant of a special permit. The existing building coverage is 1,057 square feet, 9.7%, and the proposed building coverage is 1,344 square feet, 12.3%, where 15% is the maximum allowed. The lot is non-conforming in that it contains 10,927 square feet, where 20,000 square feet is required in the R20 zoning district. A special permit is required under Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 6, and Section 5B of the Protective Bylaw.
Mr. Attorney Norcross.
Thank you.
please.
Good evening. Jamie Norcross representing Stephanie Haig, who is participating remotely this evening. This is a very modest and tasteful 270-odd square foot addition to the existing home. The goal is to create a little bit more living area on the first floor as well as a home office space on the second floor. We are here because the lot is non-conforming. It's an R20 zone. It's only about 10,900 square feet. The addition will meet all dimensional setbacks. It will still be over 40 feet from, that's actually Blueberry Lane on the left there. We're well below the height, and we're well below the building coverage requirement. If you'd like, I can go through the criteria, or?
Nope, all set, thank
right.
you.
Thank
I
you.
always check with the Chair Emeritus.
That's fine,
and
yep.
If he's comfortable, I'm comfortable.
Excellent.
All right, so, is there anybody here on Microsoft Teams that wishes to speak in favor of this application? Please indicate. No one's here, and I don't see anyone online. I only see the.
We do have the applicant
Applicant?
that would like to speak. I would just like to note that prior to the hearing several weeks ago, Attorney Norcross did submit written findings to the board members that were emailed to them and are part of the record.
Great, thank you, Sarah.
Yes, very good. And, ma'am, did you want to speak in favor of your own application?
Yes, if that's okay.
Sure.
We have been homeowners in this neighborhood since 1983, and this small addition would really help us have more living space, and I'll be able to have the laundry on the same floor as where the kitchen is now, and we'll be able to renovate the kitchen, which is original to the house. And the house was built in 1979. So we're really looking forward to being able to make these modifications. So thank you.
Sure, thank you, and we're happy that you stayed online for this long. Thank you. All right, so, anybody else wish to speak in favor? No. I will read the one letter from our health agent. Judith Giorgio writes to us on 11/27/2024 that she reviewed the plan to renovate, and the addition will add septic flow to the property. It won't, and it won't encroach on the existing system. It's improved for 3 bedrooms. The new office must remain open to the common area and expanded hallway on the 2nd floor. The property is registered as a 3-bedroom short-term rental in our database. Okay, good to know. Is there anybody here on Microsoft Teams who wishes to speak against this application or has a specific question? There is no one here. I will note that. And I don't see anyone online that wishes to speak against or has a question. Any questions from the board at all? No, seeing none.
I'll move to close the hearing and move into deliberations.
Dave Veach seconds and vote yes.
Yes.
All vote yes?
Yes.
As do I. Okay, deliberations. David Veach.
A refreshingly modest proposal that I can easily get behind. It's certainly not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. It meets all applicable criteria, and we support it.
All right, very good. And Ed?
I agree.
And David Nixon?
I want to send Jamie home with something positive.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, thank you very much, yeah.
Paul?
Yes, I agree with Dave and Dave.
I agree as well.
Well done.
I think it's a great project. I love the idea of getting the laundry up on the main floor and the kitchen renovated. Very modest, increase in coverage, increase in gross floor area. I think it's a great project and
Yeah.
meets our criteria.
Okay, and as do I. Paul?
I'll move to approve the application as submitted. What about your construction activity and so forth? Jamie, do you see any need for conditions?
Not particularly. I mean, it's a pretty small addition, so I imagine once they get started, it's going to go up pretty quick in terms of tight to the weather. Stephanie, do you know when you're planning to start? Oops, sorry.
Sorry about. I really haven't had that conversation because we had originally hoped to start earlier until we ran into this special permit process. So I would hope that he could do it in the spring. It isn't a very large addition.
I'll move to approve the application as submitted.
Dave Veach seconds and votes yes.
I vote yes.
All vote yes?
Ginny votes yes.
As do I. It's unanimous.
you very much.
Congratulations. And before we conclude our meeting, I'm going to say that I'd like to nominate, I'd like to appoint a nomination committee. I understand that requirement. And Dave Veach, would you accept that nomination?
I would accept
Along with David Nixon? You're the committee. All right,
All right.
good luck. And let's see, a motion to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
Dave Veach seconds and votes yes.
Ed votes yes.
Yes.
All votes yes?
Yes.
Steve votes yes.
Yes.
And what time is it?
7 PM.
Very good.
Oh, Sarah, you hit it right on the head.
Good night, Chatham.